very important. Okay, it is very important that you set the priorities and the allocations and the resources, and everyone keeps up with their budget. One of the people that will keep up with the budget on a day-to-day operational standpoint is the department head and their assistant, because as they are asking for funds, they should be making sure that there's money in that line item so we can continue to keep a balanced budget.
Thank you, former manager and trustee Alexander. Now, many people have been curious about what is actually the Village of Maywood's fiscal budget timeline. And as we know, the fiscal year in the Village of Maywood, it begins May the 1st through April the 30th. So generally during that time frame, the local government budget process begins. It's a highly complex, and it involves, as trustee Alexander stated, department heads to go through past year expenditures, services provided, things that are codified, mandated or unfunded mandates by federal and state governments, as well as it generally also includes the following steps as far as the budget development process, communicating that information with the public, as well as the Board of Trustees, citizen engagement, and then the budget approval, adoption, and implementation process. And again, as you know, we are joined by trustee Miguel Jones, welcome, and trustee Isaiah Brandon. And we're going to be calling upon them to give us some more information and insight as we go along.
Okay, as far as the timeline, this is Peggy speaking right now. I have to say that I worked under Mayor Freeline, and he respected the village manager form of government. So he did not micromanage me. I wasn't afraid to do my job. So I was able to freely develop the budget and work with my department heads. I remember when I did my budget as a village manager, my first meeting with my staff, with my directors, where I need everyone to cut at least 10%. We need to save money at the same time that we're spending money. See what we can cut. And I even had to ask them to see if we can cut positions. Is there anything in your department that you feel like you can do without this year? So I had the opportunity to work with a mayor that understood the village manager form of government.
Okay. Very well said. Now, again, this is actually a participatory town hall. So we want people to jump in, raise your virtual hand if you'd like to make a comment or add that information in the chat, and we will certainly bring it up to the audience. And or if you'd like to just go ahead and make a comment concerning the information that's shared tonight. Again, as I stated, we have community stakeholders and business leaders and civic leaders and just people trying to pay their taxes and pay their bills and have a quality of life in the Village of Maywood. So we want to encourage everyone to participate. So again, along the budgetary process, we see that again, that the village manager reviews the budget requests that are submitted mid-March and usually through July 1st with the finance director. Meetings are held with department directors and the budget staff to go over those requests. And once the village manager drafts the proposed budget, it goes into the legislative body, and that is the Village Board of Trustees for approval, and then it's filed with the clerk. Trustee Jones, can you give us a little bit more insight of how that process is going currently?
Yeah, Johnny, thanks for that. So maybe before I speak about the current process, I did want to give a little bit of a caveat to how we get to our budget number. So at the end of the year, calendar year, we have to agree to a levy amount, a tax levy amount that we're going to collect, or that the county's going to collect. The county's going to collect on behalf of the Village of Maywood. And so at that meeting, that's where we determine whether or not we're going to either stay consistent at 0%, or we'll go up. And typically, it ranges from like 0 to 5% in terms of what you're asking the county to collect. And so once that happens, once the board approves that, typically that triggers the process where a village manager and department heads kind of know, like what type of resources they're going to have in order to execute on village operations. And so this year, we decided to, keep the levy the same. And so what that means is that we're going to collect the same amount of money from the county. Now, some things to think about before I kind of talk about what's happening now is that typically salaries and benefits based on union agreements or just, quality of life or what's sort of inflation, related costs. Normally salaries go up, anywhere between 2 to 5% annually, those costs. And so, and we have to pay that. And so when that happens, if you don't increase the levy, you're essentially saying that, the resources that we use for operations and compared to the 2025 budget or last year's budget, we're going to have to reduce that. And so I just want to kind of give that caveat of how we do that. So pretty much from the end of December through April, when we have to approve the ordinance for pass the budget, that's where the village manager and the department heads are, looking to present, what those resources are going to be used for the village. So how's it going now? Transparently, it's not going well. I believe the biggest pain point has been, the buck stops with our village manager in this form of government. And so the village manager has to manage the timing in which department heads deliver their corresponding department budgets. And then the finance director essentially consolidates those recommendations into one big proposal that's ultimately submitted to the board and then approved. And so based on that timeline that I submitted, typically, you're looking at about 2 to maybe 3 months, from like January through March, where you're coming up with a draft. And that gives the board about a month or so, or maybe 2 months, if there's a draft done by February, late February, for March and April to be the time where you discuss it and consider it and amend it and come up with different drafts and take into considerations, and where ultimately you land at, where you want to land for the year. And so we're in a position now where we're reviewing our budget that's due April 30th. We're reviewing it last minute, and from my observation, it's due to us not having a draft ready early enough for us to have the appropriate discussions and deliberation. And so, which is not good. We're talking about our resources to execute our town. And so it's fair and transparent for residents and board members and et cetera to have enough time to digest that and give recommendations, et cetera. So we're using the time now to, kind of do that. And then I'll pause. I know I've been rambling, so I'll pause there.
No, not a problem. It's going to be an interesting night. I can't say it's going to be a long night. It's going to be interesting because we're going to go through the actual presentation that shows the budget proposed by the manager and the finance director. But speaking of citizen engagement and communicating the budget, Trustee Jones,
before you go any further, I just want to piggyback on something that Trustee Jones was talking about. Usually within the time frame over the course of the year that the budget is being utilized, there have been some finance committee meetings where some of these things come up to determine where we are at certain times that the finance committee looks at, asks questions, and usually the department heads are there. So this can be discussed with the department head and the manager in terms of where we are. Because as you have those committee meetings, you're tracking the expenditures over that period of time. And you see when you're getting to a threshold of going way over or you're far under to help them decide where they might want to do some things in their own departments. But those meetings were open to the public. So the public could hear the dialogue that was going on and where some questions were being asked. And they were able to ask some questions if it wasn't a lot of people there. Other than that, they listened and asked the committee questions later.
One of the things that I noticed from watching the previous board meeting from the meeting April the 22nd, going into the budget hearing, actually, I think there were comments made concerning committee and commission meetings. And since we have Trustee Jones and Trustee Brandon with us, can you share with us how the Fiscal and Accountability and Government Transparency Committee meetings or citizens should have or could have been informed or engaged during this process?
Yeah, so I can chime in on that. So Johnny and everyone on the call. So what should happen is that there should be some sort of meeting, whether it be a finance committee or a committee meeting or a committee as a whole. But essentially, there should be one meeting that is used to kind of give a formal presentation of the budget, and then that's where you the community gets to ask questions, the board gets to ask questions, and then you kind of go back for a pretty standard round of revisions. So it's expected for there to be some feedback. In the case of the finance committee, in which I chair, starting in I'm going to say it was about December, I decided to table our meetings until after this election and after the new board's new trustees were sworn in. And part of it, part of the motivation for that is because our committee recommendations were not properly flowing up to the board for recommendation and approval. And so, when that started happening, it became, one of those things where, for me, it became a little bit of a waste of time. And so, what I had, recommended is that we bring it to the board, this budget as a whole, earlier, just so we can review it as a whole in replacement to the finance committee. And that didn't happen, kind of due to the time frame that I mentioned. So I did want to give a caveat of how that should have worked is that regardless of the meeting mechanism, there should be something, and which is really led by the village manager to, give an opportunity, which is standard practice for the community to have an opportunity to see the department heads speak on their individual departments, and then have the village manager, just kind of overall, speaking to our trends year over year and what we did in order to accommodate what we could do with our resources to move forward.
Right. But the finance committee is really kind of critical as you go through the course of the year and as you lead up to a proposed budget. If the finance committee isn't watching the funds, who's watching the funds over the course of the year? And, it's kind of hard to dismiss those committee meetings or recommendations or discussion.
Right. Now, one of the things that I will share with everyone in the participating audience today, as you see, if you have an issue, if you have a concern, if you have a question, or just want to make a comment concerning anything, just jump right on in. That's what we want to have this as a participatory and a purposeful town hall meeting. But one of the things on the screen that you see here, when it comes down to communicating the budget, again, Trustee Jones, thank you for that clarification. Both Trustee Jones and Trustee Antonio Sanchez, chair that Fiscal Accountability and Government Transparency Committee meetings. We also have, as you see, or the village could host community town hall meetings to share this budgetary process with citizens, as well as it was stated, department-focused discussion sessions. I think in the past, Trustee Alexander mentioned that was a part of the process when she was working at the Village of Maywood. My question again is, has there been a need for community assessments or a community needs survey to be shared back with the community when it comes to the budget process, or everything is handled internally by the quote-unquote budget officer, and that is the manager. Trustee Brandon, welcome.
Yes. Yeah, I think any mechanism, and good evening to everybody that's on the Zoom and those who are participating and watching. I think any mechanisms that you could, put in place to get the citizens' involvement and input as we, are shaping the budget is important to get, what, ideas they may have, and most certainly to work through your elected officials as well to advocate for those things, whether it be like lead lines, whether it be additional funding to replace trees throughout the community, some of those issues that have been plaguing the village for a long time, or any of those old age issues, right? Citizens most certainly should feel comfortable with communicating those things to their elected officials. But I think those additional tools will most certainly help us as we shape the priorities of the village, and you do that through the budget, right? And so that's what the purpose of it is to help shape what your upcoming priorities will be. And so I think that the other thing is too, the whole timing of this recent budget that we, are preparing to approve on this upcoming Wednesday. The timing was just totally just unacceptable and not conducive to healthy decision making either. I think we had received it at 8 p.m. the night before we were expected to vote on it. And that's why the budget was tabled, to be able to give us as elected leaders more time to be able to review, recommend, and then approve the budget based on what we have approved and recommended, right? It's supposed to be an avenue to let people, put different ideas on the table, that they've heard from residents, issues that need to be addressed. And so this whole process, unfortunately has been, I've never seen it like this since I've been watching the village government since 7th grade, that there has been very little conversation on what's happening with it, how it's shaped, and some of those, ideas, whether it be from the public or even from the board. It's really unfortunate, but we got to continue to make sure that we are advocating that the village manager understands what his role is, what type of government we're operating in, and making sure that everybody has a seat at the table and a voice at the table as well.
Okay, so and that brings us to the ultimate point. We understand the process now, and let's talk about the approval of the annual budget. Information that we have, as you stated, ascertaining requests or needs, assessments from departments, working with the finance department, working with department heads and managers of those departments in the Village of Maywood to come up with a budget once it's presented, with or without citizen input, without finance committee meetings. Now we're at a point where the budget has to be approved. And can you share with us a little bit about the budget officer's role and responsibilities in that process of presenting that information to the Board of Trustees?
Well, let me just say something real quick. The budget doesn't have to be approved by the 30th. I mean, there could be a delay in budget approval. I don't care if it's a week or a month. There isn't anything that said that it has to be done by April 30th, because you might have to trim that budget for whatever reason, because you got to know how much money is there. And that's part of the problem. There's been no audit, and we don't know how much has been spent to know how much money we're working with. So
that is also true. And one of the things that I hope that we'll get into, but I just want everyone to bear in mind that part of this process, I would say, should have included also the Village of Maywood treasurer, because they are also a fiscal officer and has fiduciary responsibility in the Village of Maywood. So how interesting is the process? And this question is either for Trustee Jones or Trustee Brandon. Many people that have been keeping up with the budgetary process of the Village of Maywood have noticed that certain financial reports that are required, such as the fiscal audit by an independent auditor, has consistently been delinquent. How does the past audits, because we can talk about the budget, and I hope everyone will consider this almost how you may manage your personal or your home finances. Sometimes there's so much month at the end of the money, and adjustments have to be made, as Trustee Jaycox was stating. But the independent audits, how would that report, or from a compliance standpoint, factor into budget projections?
Yeah, so Johnny, I can maybe speak to that, or I'll share my perspective on it. So audits in general are, mandated by the state. And so we have to do them. And just like with any, although the village isn't publicly traded, but, with any organization our side, it's expected that we're going to have our financials reviewed by, a CPA firm. And essentially, what it does is it gives the community reassurance that the financial statements that we're providing are accurate. And another thing is that what they do is they talk about these things called internal controls, which essentially what they do is they do an assessment of our operations, and they essentially determine where our operation or where the village is risky as it relates to segregation of duties and funding balances and other obligations that we have. So we really could lean on that to get a third party statement to actually say that our financial statements are accurate. Now, some other implications too, which stream down, or that I've been talking about, are implications regarding the finalization of TIFs, creation of TIFs, and then also of bonds and et cetera. Normally, if you're going to entertain those things about insurance company or those type of entities are going to want to see financial statements from an auditor saying that your financial statements are essentially sound. So that's like the major implication, I guess, in terms of when we're creating the budget. What we don't necessarily have a frame of reference for are those financials. But I think the other thing that we don't utilize is normally the budget is looked at from a income statement perspective, and not so much the balance sheet, which would kind of look at the village's deficit, our assets versus our liabilities. And so it also helps us understand within our budget, when you do have a deficit, essentially what you would like to do is to have resources baked in where you're reducing it continually, or there should be a path forward for that. Which is difficult to do when you're not increasing the levy. And so like those are things or considerations that I think, are worth outside of just pure compliance. There's different grants and et cetera that you can't get from the state or federally if you're not in compliance with those things. So the village is in a positive standing, despite the fact that we are tardy, because you can file for extensions. But regardless, we should aim and should be achieving hitting these deadlines. And it takes planning. It takes being available. When the auditors are available, you have to provide them samples on time. You have to explain, you have to answer questions. And so it takes time. And so it's one of those things where it's a lot of moving parts. But I just want to provide my insight on that.
When was the last time you still have Baxter Tilly as your auditors, right?
Correct.
When was the last time they presented an audit presentation?
In terms of presenting an audit presentation, they came to the finance committee to present the findings of the fiscal year 2023-2024 last year. And so that was, and that has been distributed. And I actually, in lieu of not having finance committee meetings, I did provide a summary that I've posted on social media. It was relatively informal, but I did want to give a synopsis of my take on those items. But I would like to give a caveat too, and where the residents can really lean in on very constructive feedback on what's happening in our community is
okay. So they didn't do one publicly. There wasn't one presented to the public.
So when you say the public, if you're talking about a Village of Maywood board meeting, no, they have not come to a Village of Maywood board meeting. To my memory, they did come to a finance committee meeting, but I just wanted to kind of say those internal controls. That's a separate report provided by Baker Tilly. Provide a large insight into opportunities for the village to address risk, based on their criteria of reviewing municipalities and comparing us. So I just want to throw that out there as well as opportunities for, residents and the board to dive in and hold our village manager accountable and our director of finance to address those issues.
Right. Now, as you see on your screen currently, this is Mr. Frank Torres, and he is currently the Village of Maywood manager. And we also will share with you our finance director for the Village of Maywood, Ms. Lanye Satchel. And these are the individuals that are ultimately responsible. One of the things that we're going to be sharing also with citizens in the chat, we have information relating back to, quote unquote, the code, the statutes of the Village of Maywood, the law, so to speak. And again, feel free to click on any of these hyperlinked. We also share the information on our Facebook page, a link of the working document to kind of, guide people along this process, and so that you can read for yourself and see for yourself some of the roles, the responsibilities, and duties that these people have charge of. And as you see, the chief budget officer is, quote unquote, the village manager, who's appointed by the village president and the board of trustees. Okay. And as you see again, the investment and fiscal policy for the Village of Maywood.
Before we move on, may I ask a question?
Yes. Yes.
I was at the budget meeting, and the finance director said that nothing was going to change on that document. It was only a document, and nothing was going to change because they could switch money from one line item to another line item, and the bottom line wouldn't change. But is that your take on that also, that nothing can change on this budget right now? It is what it is.
Well, you will hope that if, since we had such a short amount of time to review it, that if there were other items that needed to be put in the budget, there would be an opportunity for us to be able to do so based on the time that we received to review the budget. And again, it was our first time reviewing it collectively. Normally there's more time to be able to review it and make recommendations. And so after the meeting, as you know, because you were there, the budget was tabled, right? And so based on us reviewing it, it was our hope that, we would be able to submit some recommendations to the budget and to the village manager to include some things, since we didn't have enough time to really dive into it the first go around. And so there has been a lot of pushback or really no negotiations as to what other folks would like to, other board members would like to see in the budget. It seems or appears to be that they're creating this new, I guess, style of governing, which is like silencing or limiting the voices of the board to be able to include different ideas or different suggestions as far as the budget. So it's looking like they are absolutely right that nothing will change within the budget, because they're not really willing to allow other folks to bring ideas or items to the table.
Well, not just ideas, but some in some spots of the budget, there needs to be some clarification and justification for the amount of money that they're putting on certain line items. And the only people that can clarify that would be the manager, you know, in conjunction with their director if necessary. But the manager is supposed to be able to clarify any questions and justify putting those amounts of monies on particular line items.
Yeah, and I had a concern as it relates to how individuals were receiving pay increases within the village. You know, you have some people receiving like a 3.5 and some receiving like a 5% increase. So, you know, my concern is, you know, how are we coming up with, you know, these increases? Some of them include, you know, it's almost close to a $10,000 increase, but there's really no explanation for it. And so for me, it's just like, okay, how are we balancing this thing? You know, and is it fair across the board to the other employees as well? And so, you know, those are some of my concerns that I brought to the table, and they really were not responded to or addressed.
Okay. Well, I certainly find that very shocking and alarming, and I hope as we get into the actual, you know, meat of the proposed budget, it will spark some additional conversations related to process and procedures, and specifically going back to policy. So one of the things, and I threw this in here regarding the credit card policy, as you all know, CFA, we're just a group of concerned citizens, business leaders, civic leaders, and just people who want to do our best to kind of watch over and watch what's going on and sharing that information back out to the community. We sort of highlighted in a previous correspondence that we were able to FOIA the Village of Maywood American Express card. Okay. And it was very surprising that there were some activity and charges on that credit card that we hope to bring out to the public to share back with the community. Are they being responsible users of the credit card, or just thinking that, well, hey, as long as taxpayers pay their taxes and we can collect fees and fines, you know, the credit card bill will be paid eventually, or what have you. So I want everyone to pay attention to the village's credit card policy that should be available on the website, at the mayor's office, at the clerk's department, and the finance department. But it's not on the website, and it certainly wasn't available at the clerk's office when the FOIA request went in. So we'll just move along and get right into the reason we're all here tonight, to talk a little bit more in depth about the fiscal year 2025-2026 operating budget of the Village of Maywood. And this is the actual presentation that was presented at the April 22nd board meeting. So let's go ahead and dive in.
I'm sorry, Johnny. Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead. I had a question as well.
Okay. He said something about someone getting a $10,000 raise, and I was trying to see, were these cost of living increases, or were these bonuses? Can you kind of expound on what was meant when you said a $10,000 raise? Was these the yearly cost of living increases, or was this like something contractual? Can you just kind of expound on that a little bit?
Okay. Trustee Brandon, I think that was directed to you, sir.
Yeah, no, it was neither contractual or a cost of living. You know, the same person received about the same amount just last year, in last year's fiscal year budget as well. And so that's why it was a red flag for me when I saw it. You know, I wanted to know right away, okay, so what is, you know, what merits another large increase?
Was there
a
a performance?
It was even larger than what the actual number is in the budget. You know, this individual requested even more. And so for me, that is a red flag of how we are, you know, allocating, you know, these increases to our employees. Is it consistent across the board? You know, is it, are we playing favoritism? What how we doing it? And there was just really no explanation for it, other than this person requested more money, and they negotiated at that level on what was in the budget.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Can I ask what office was that? What position was that was requesting that kind of money?
That was community engagement.
Okay, so my question is this. In that policy and procedure manual that is supposed to be available to us, I'm sure there should be something about a performance evaluation in relationship to someone getting a raise. Was there a performance evaluation that can back up the amount of money that was allocated for this person's raise?
If there was, it wasn't communicated when the question was asked to the director of finance or to the manager. They didn't explain that there was a performance evaluation.
Okay, so I find all this confusing, because in my experience, there's a hierarchy. So whomever that employee reports to would be the person to give them the evaluation, and that person would dialogue with the finance manager or the manager to determine, is it in the budget, can they afford it? In my experience, you know, every department is determined by the number of employees in that department to some degree, how large the raises can be. Because one department may have 4 or 5 people, another department may have 15 or 20 people. So, and I could be totally off the mark here. So that's why I'm asking for some clarification. Every department head.
Okay, I think we have the gist of your question and your comment. one of the things that we'll see as we go into the budget, you actually see in the middle column the fiscal year of 24-25, the budget, and then the actual proposed budget. And the finance director does show a differential in some of the information. What CFA has been able to do also is to publish that document so that the actual proposed budget, so that citizens can really take a more closer look at these things. So it does not show salary information. It does not show tenure. It does not show, as Trustee Brandon alluded to, if this was a contractual performance or if they've been reviewed. But I will remind everyone that the only employee that the Board of Trustees have is, quote unquote, the village manager. The village manager is, quote unquote, like the CEO running the day-to-day operations of the Village of Maywood. And that includes employees. And the Board of Trustees, mind you, hold the manager accountable. And let me share this information. CFA, we previously shared information about our concerns with the current village manager, his background, his qualifications, as well as certain behavioral things that are questionable. But one of the things that I noticed in his contract is that he is obligated to have 2 performance reviews. Have those performance reviews taken place since he's been a assistant village manager or an actual village man acting as the village manager from his appointment? Trustee Brandon or Trustee Jones?
Yeah, no to that question. There has not been any reviews of the village manager, but yet still he received a $5,000 bonus and is getting ready to receive another $5,000 bonus without there being any review in place at all. And again, this is unprecedented for us. I've never seen us give a bonus to anyone, to any village manager, without doing that due diligence, right, to make sure that he or she is meeting whatever goals that have been outlined by the village board. And so, and it's unhealthy as well for the village, because you're just giving out money for, just to be giving it out without having any metrics in place.
Who recommended his raise? Who recommended his raise?
The mayor as well as the other officials.
So I encourage everyone to take a look at the information that we shared in our April podcast series. It was titled, "Who is he and what is he to you?" So we shared the information of not only his resume, his contract, but also questions that CFA had concerning not only just the lack of the performance reviews, but also tenets of the contract that have not been met to our information. So we are forwarding the Village of Maywood for that information. But again, we're here to focus on the budget. The manager is, quote unquote, the budget officer of the Village of Maywood. And I hope you all are eager and interested to find out, how Maywood's money is being proposed to be spent. So as you see, Maywood is a 60.
I'm sorry, I would like to interject real quick
Yes,
for everyone. I'm Claudia Vandiver, long-term resident, creator of the Maywood Watchdog. I just wanted to interject a couple of things. As a co-host, I'm in the chat, so if you guys have questions, because I know that Johnny's doing an awesome job directing the flow of the meeting, but if you have questions and concerns, you can feel free to put them in the chat, and then as we go along, we'll make sure that we get to your questions. But then also, as a co-host, I also wanted to make it clear that the objective of today's meeting is definitely to let you know how things are supposed to go, what the budget process is supposed to be, so that we can then get into a lot of the issues and concerns of how things may not be operating along the path and in the order in which things should be. But with that being said, back to Johnny.
Okay, I have a question. I don't know how to put it in the chat. Otherwise, I would, Claudia.
Go ahead,
my question is overall about the process. When does the budget have to be finalized? I heard a couple of comments about that. And what happens if it isn't at the time that it's supposed to be?
Okay, Trustee Jones.
Yeah. So the village is supposed to approve our budget by the end of the fiscal year, which will be April 30th. What are the consequences if that does not happen? I don't know the exact consequences. Typically, since I've been around, that has not been the case.
You're just operating without a budget. That's all.
Yeah, I would imagine. I would imagine there's just some compliant, obligations that you have to hit. And so, what happens when you don't? I don't know if the village wants to find out, but I will say, I think there might be some approaches, because at the end of the day, like what the board approves is what the board approves, and we can outline it and we can delay it if we need be once we understand those implications. If the community is willing to, kind of take on whatever that burden would be. But I don't know the exact consequences, so I don't want to make something up. But I do know that it's mandated for every community, in this, in our form of government, that have this fiscal year calendar to have it presented by, or have the code ratified by the end of the fiscal year.
Okay. And again, the fiscal year for the Village of Maywood is April May 30th. All right. So as you see, again, the Village of Maywood's operating budget or proposed budget is $65,489,000 and a lot of change, $742. And as you see how it's broken down, the proposed from the general fund, the motor fuel tax fund, the recreation fund, federal grant fund, water and sewer and garbage, the Madison Street TIF, Roosevelt TIF, and State Grants Fund. And these are all the projected revenue sources for the Village of Maywood. Okay. Now, as you see, concerning the general fund, the projected revenue budgeted for 2026 is $39,164,783, with the projected expenditures also being $39,162,073. That is the framework in which it is stated that they have a balanced budget. However, we know life happens and that there may be other factors that impact the budget, incomes, revenues, other things that may either increase or short those projected revenues inflows.
I think we should go through the line items because this is just general, and people, I know what we're talking about, and most of these questions, I don't want to put either trustees on the spot, because if you know the village manager form of government, all our trustees and mayor has one vote, okay? They do not handle the day-to-day, so the person that we should hold responsible for is the village manager, and that's why it's so important that we go out Wednesday, even though we may not change anything because they have that 4 votes and go thing under wrap. I was very surprised.
Yes, we can do that. Now, one of the things that I will share with the audience is we've taken the actual paper proposed budget that was submitted via FOIA to one of our CFA members, and we've put it in an Excel spreadsheet, and we'd be more than happy to share that with everyone. So as you see on your screen now, and I'll be going back and forth between the PowerPoint presentation to the actual itemized budget. So what she was suggesting concerning revenues, as you see, we have 5 columns here. You know, one shows the actual revenue as far as the budget line item or the budget account information, the descriptive of that account, as well as the current fiscal year budget as far as 2025, and then what is proposed. And we're also showing a difference. If you see any dash or line, that means there's no budgetary difference between 2025 and 2026. If you see something that's in parentheses, that means basically a deficit or decrease from last year's funding. So, Trustee Alexander, is there anything concerning the revenues that you wanted to take a look at? I'll just scroll kind of slowly through this so that we can take a look.
Okay. Well, I have marked how much are the liquor licenses? Since it says we didn't have a budget, we didn't budget any money to receive any money this year, but we're guaranteed, we want to receive $100,000 the next year. Is that a question I need to ask the village manager or the mayor, because I know he is over the liquor license? I don't know if he has a committee or he's a committee of one, but I would like to know how much are the liquor licenses and the qualifications to get one.
Okay. Well, again, this is projected revenue. This is projected revenue. So in total concerning the liquor licenses, and this is on line 30, it shows that for fiscal year 2025, they projected revenue of $60,000 and projected revenue this year of $75,000. Now, one thing to keep in mind when concerning liquor license, as Trustee Alexander mentioned, the mayor is, quote unquote, the chair of the liquor commission. There are other commissioners that are appointed. The mayor receives $10,000 for his service on the liquor commission also. So one of the things that we may want to take a look, it's been broadcast and promoted very widely, and we see a lot of the newer restaurants and eateries around Maywood, they have applied for and have received, quote unquote, different classifications of liquor license. So that may address the increase of $15,000 towards revenue coming in from liquor license.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Hey, Ms. Sharp.
How are you?
Okay.
Listen, I see all of this and I'm listening to you very well. My question that I want to know is, we pay for the mayor's insurance for his car. Since he's a part-time mayor, how much of that do we actually pay? Because after a certain time, he's really not supposed to be driving. And if he is, does he have his own insurance? I need to know that.
And Johnny, can I interject, kind of piggybacking on her question? What everybody's looking at right now is like the corporate budget, you know, and when we talk about corporate, that's basically the monies that are used to pay month-to-month expenses or throughout the year. But what a lot of board members may not realize is that the board itself has its own budget. So in reviewing that budget, a lot of the expenses that the board incurs, whether it's their training fees, potentially the mayor's vehicle, it would fall underneath that subheading. So if we really wanted to find out how much potentially we're paying for an insurance, that would most definitely be a line item that would come underneath the board, because that's where his vehicle potentially cost is being paid out of. So right now we're looking at just the general budget.
And one thing to also say about the budget, 2025 to 2026, we don't know, because nothing has been reported, whether we met the amounts of money in those budget items for 2025. Say for instance, clerk office fees. I'm just looking at one. It says $1,500. We don't know whether we got $500, $1,000, or $1,600. So there's no differential between the two. But go ahead.
Trustee Jones, you wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, I wanted to address a couple comments. So Yes, our insurances for each department, that auto insurance should be under that respective department head's budget. How it works is that the village has a large insurance plan, and individuals that are operating our vehicles, should be on that policy as like drivers essentially. So how to itemize that per person is a good question in terms of if we're able to do that, or if that's how the policy works, or if it's broken out per person, how much it is, or et cetera. But I did want to also talk about what we were looking at were projections. It's just the budget. I think what Ms. Jaycox was getting at, there aren't any actuals there to help get a feel for how do we actually perform, and so we can understand, okay, so in this budget, this is more of what we're hoping to get, but the trend says that we haven't been able to accomplish that, and we could dive in to see, okay, why aren't we receiving the type of income that we're projecting. So I also wanted to throw out how the budget works, and this is really important. How the budget works, once it's finalized, I would even refer to it almost like our Bible, in the sense of when we appropriate resources, that's supposed to be it. And so if you want to do something that has not been appropriated, you need to do a budget amendment, which essentially say, hey, we want to include something that wasn't in there, and we want to take out something that we were otherwise going to use those resources for and allocate it to another use. That's the appropriate way to do it. A good example that happened at our budget meeting was was the mayor's car, which those resources came out of the village manager's budget, and he did not have a purchase of a vehicle in his budget. And so what you're not allowed to do is to say, okay, let's say for instance you had two employees in the department, and let's say you didn't, and you were preparing to hire someone that was not hired before the beginning of the year. You don't hire that person. So let's say you save that salary, right? In theory, that's supposed to be what in finance we call bottom line impact, which means it's supposed to be cash that we save. You can't just say, oh, well, since we save that money, we're going to use that to purchase a car. Now, the board can do that, but you have to amend the budget. And so what we did at the board meeting, and what we're going to do, the community needs to, and then we'll be bringing back up, since we did not amend the budget, which actually takes a super majority to do that. You can't do that with a simple majority of 4-3. You have to have a super majority of 5-2 to amend the budget. We're essentially going to have to bring that purchase back up because it wasn't, the appropriation for it was not in the budget in that line item. And so you have to do that. So I just want to give a little bit of context to how the budget works and how you're earmarking things for certain use. And if that doesn't happen, you should either be saving money. If you, overspend in a line item, then essentially that would create a deficit. And then the expectation is that you would, in order to not, have a deficit, you would reduce spend somewhere else. So I just want to kind of give a little bit of caveat to that.
Yeah. And the other part of that, from an accounting standpoint as well, the amendment allows for us to be able to see like the proper allocation of funds and help prevent potential misappropriation as well. And it really helps to ensure a seamless tracking during the audit time period as well. And so I most certainly did email the manager, as well as the village attorney, as well as the finance director as well, who knows and understands that the $64,000 that was identified by the manager in his budget the budget needs to be amended so that he can then transfer those monies over to the mayor's office as a line item, right? Because it doesn't exist currently. And so I actually spoke with him earlier today regarding this matter, and he had to seek legal counsel support to be able to navigate through this whole ordeal, because anything else would just be inappropriate for the village. And then, again, it just prevents us from properly tracking where money is going and how money is getting there.
Okay.
Well, that to me.
Thank you, Ms. Sharp, for that poignant question, and thank you, Trustee Jones.
May I make a comment, please?
Yes.
When I was at that board meeting, I got the feeling that what Lanier was saying is that it doesn't matter because we got this padded so that we will not have to make an amendment. You can change whatever line item you need to change in this budget. So she didn't feel a need for it to be tabled because the bottom line was not going to change. Well, and if that's the way we are doing business, I think that's inappropriate.
Yeah. So Peggy, just to answer that really quickly, it's really about for doing what are best practices. So that's why we have bid waiver. We have bidding processes for spend over a certain amount of money because we're using public resources. And so that's a way of us giving the public reassurance that we are getting the most bang for our buck. What she was, and that's just her perspective, but she's not an elected official. So the actual process is, if we're going by the book, which we should amend the budget if we know that a line item where resources are earmarked, that we are going to be reassigning that. Now, there are ways in which you don't have to do that from the perspective of, let's use tree cutting as an example. Let's say you have $50,000 in the budget to cut trees, but during the course of the year, you're like, we have a lot of dead trees. We're probably going to be closer to 80,000. Since that's in the budget, it's already earmarked. You just exceed what you said you were going to spend. So what let's say public works for the director could say, hey, you know what, I'm not going to purchase this car, or I'm not going to purchase this equipment otherwise, and then I'm just going to spend more money on trees. And in that example, technically you would need an amendment, but since those allocations were there and you're not reassigning it, it's still transparent and there's still a line item to understand what happened. But ultimately, as far as formal process, if you're looking to change the budget, which is ultimately a forecast update over the course of certain periods, because things happen where you are going to change items and you do need to do that. The formal process is to have formal budget amendments to address those changes in priorities over the course of the year.
But one clarification to me, you are reassigning the money because you're taking the money out of one line item and putting it in another, and that is a reassignment, and therefore, like you say, it will need an amendment. But go ahead.
What justification do
Right.
that department have to write a justification and change it, or do we just switch the money out?
No, so
it needs to be amended.
It's supposed to be amended first. Like you're supposed to approve it first, or or the village manager should get the sentiment of the board and say, okay, is this here's what happened. Here's what we I'd like to recommend. Can we do that? They might get moving forward, but essentially the first step would be to get approval first and then proceed.
Yeah. Right. So and that just how we're currently operating, it tells us that we need to make sure that even the manager has some additional training as well to even think that was even a possible thing, that you could just transfer dollars over from one department to another department without there being an amendment in place. Tells us that there's some additional training that is needed as well.
So we have not been doing amendments, or we have been doing amendments on those smaller things.
Well, if it's not in the budget, if it wasn't budgeted,
But I need to move money. Do we is that director responsible, or should make an amendment before he moves that money?
An amendment needs to be made before you move money from another department to properly track it and trace where dollars are being sent to and where it's coming from.
Right. And when the budget's amended,
it needs to be budgeted as well. If it's not budgeted, most certainly the budget needs to be amended.
And I'd say this, and these ladies certainly, I hope, will speak up and speak out. We have two CPAs that I know of that have joined us this evening, stalwarts in the community, Ms. Vina Nelson and Ms. Sandra Gibson. Please share your expertise and insight at your leisure. Let's look at one of the things that I guess kind of people hint on, considering we know one specific department where a staff person at the Village of Maywood will potentially or possibly receive a very enlarged salary increase. And there are new positions that are slated to be budgeted for fiscal year 2026. And Public Works, a superintendent, laborer, and code enforcement will bring on a superintendent. Okay. And so when we look at the analysis of the different fund departments, we also see certain differentials. But overall, the subtotal general fund shows a difference of 4% from 2025 to 2026. Okay. And as I stated, we do have available information from every department. The clerk's department budget.
Okay.
The village manager's budget, as it was stated, showing a significant decrease.
I had a circle around for the village clerk's budget. They didn't feel like they're going to codify anything this year.
Right, no money.
And they are putting in some more help. And I know you guys are not the ones to answer this. This is why it's so important that we come to board meeting and voice our opinion, to be somewhat y'all's backup. They put the health and vision and life insurance in for the clerk. And she is not a full-time employee. She's not even a part-time employee. She's a part-time elected official. And when I looked at the codification, when I looked at the 30, their responsibility, what the village clerk is supposed to be and what she's supposed to get, it says she would receive health insurance as the employees of the village does.
Well, Trustee Alexander, let me kind of give some insight, and Trustee Jones and Brandon, please share this information. As citizens, as you all know, the Board of Trustees, a majority of the board, voted for a stipend increase for the mayor, clerk, and trustees recently. And the ordinance that was actually approved states that the mayor and the clerk, not the trustees, are eligible to participate in the health and life insurance package, benefits with the as the Village of Maywood full-time employees. I think that's where Trustee Alexander is alluding to. But it's budgeted whether or not she decides to participate in the health and insurance benefit program as the other village employees. We wait to see, but they're eligible to participate.
But she's not eligible because she's not an employee. That's my point.
I'm saying
she's not eligible, so that should not be right.
Well, there's a difference between opinion and what is a codified ordinance that the board has approved. Now, I would say the same process that was questioned during that time when the motion was made and the recommendation was, I guess, provided by the corporate attorneys to the Village of Maywood, you know, on how to proceed or what would be the best approach towards this. And I think since, you know, Trustee Jones and Trustee Brandon are here, they can speak directly to that for clarification for the citizens. How did that come about? Or was that one of those, you know, closed session meetings to add them or allow them to be eligible as part-time, quote unquote, elected officials to be eligible to participate in the health benefits package for the Village of Maywood?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, one quick question, because someone in the chat, before the trustees answers that, someone in the chat also wants to know, and if it does end up in which they get the insurance, who do you think would be responsible for paying the premiums for it? So
The village.
Yeah, well, so how health insurance works is that the employer pays a portion and the employee pays a portion through their you know, kind of W-2 withholdings if they elect to do it, which is an option. And I would encourage the residents, and I'm going to share my personal opinion on this as I answer the context of how we got here. But it is an option to elect. I would encourage the residents to encourage the mayor and the clerk not to elect. So the context of this, and the board went out of order, or I shouldn't say the board went out of order. These are mayoral initiatives, but essentially behind the scenes, there was discussions, and as you all know, about changing the form of government. And what I believe was happening is that there was a setting of the stage to prepare that. And so instead of waiting to see what the results would be and then us kind of transitioning there, I believe that there was this idea that regardless of what the community decides, since we work hard and, you know, we've made this the role that we want to make it, despite what our form of government says are our responsibilities, that, you know, we believe we need a salary increase and we believe we've earned these benefits. And I believe that has to do with, there's a culture in Maywood that has to be challenged. And we have to reel in on our village manager form of government and essentially say, well, you know, whether it be full, you know, SUVs, et cetera, like that doesn't fit the roles. And it's not really about the people that are sitting in the seats, but it's about, you know, what do we see these roles in general outside of an individual sitting in them. And so that's where I think we can realign, is basically saying, hey, this doesn't make sense for a village clerk that's part-time, right, to be getting, you know, health benefits, or even a village president that is part-time. And is that what we're seeing in other communities with our form of government? And so it was, just to co-sign what Johnny says, it was a part of that you know, codification ordinance where the salaries would increase in the next mayoral term. Incorporated in that was language suggesting that they can elect for those benefits. And I believe it was with this idea that we're like, or I think their projection was that we were transitioning governments. And so now, since we're not, I think this is where the community can take an opportunity and switch the lens back to the village manager, and then also, you know, remind the village, you know, our elected officials that the culture of these roles were in essence volunteer roles. They weren't career roles, right? And so you're not allowed without the community's permission to convert those roles just because of that's how you see most beneficial. And I think that's where the community has to push back and say, no, you know, this does not coincide with our vision of our form of government. And I just want to answer my opinion on that, because I think that's how we got here, is because we were preparing the transition and that wasn't the case. And so now the residents have to say, okay, you know, that's what we're doing. That's how we're moving forward.
Okay. Thank you, Trustee. So to clarify that issue, how it relates back to the proposed budget and potentially or possibly how that line item in the clerk's office was increased, was either the anticipation or the expectation. And certainly I would hope, Trustee Jones, Trustee Brandon, would there be a motion to amend that ordinance or to revise that codified ordinance, you know, or just keep our fingers crossed that they, quote unquote, do the right thing?
I think it should be amended.
I don't know. So since that was related to salaries and compensation, typically you can't amend current elected official salaries and compensation. Typically, now in terms of healthcare, that's more of an election, you know, versus salaries is, you know, typically just your, you know, kind of payroll that you're getting. But you know, you know, when you're filling out your, you know, your forms or whatever, something that HR is going to ask, do you want to take it? So I think that's one of those things where the easiest thing would be for the citizens to demand of those elected officials not to elect it. I don't know if there's a path forward to say, hey, we want to reel it back. That's more of an attorney question. I don't know the answer to that, but I'm under the impression that you can't amend, you know, salary for current elected officials. You can't, like, benefits and salaries, you can't amend that for current elected officials. It would only be kind of retroactive to, you know, like the folks that are going to fulfill those seats in the next term.
The next term.
May I ask a question on that line? Can a elected official get any benefits from the village? I thought it was they couldn't benefit from anything when it comes to the village other than their salary they're getting. Because to me, that's a benefit. And it's that precedent.
Right.
And it's a cost. It's a benefit because it's an additional cost to the village to pay their portion, our portion of their insurance.
May I interject?
Yes, go right ahead.
that is a benefit. And being a former HR manager, you're supposed to meet the criteria. No part-time employees should be getting health insurance. So if they're going to slate that for elected official, what's next? IMRF? That's going to come next.
Hello?
Right. Now for those, thank you, Ms. Rails. That is a very interesting question that she brings up. And the acronym for IMRF is the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund. So as we know, there are some very gracious corporations that offer part-time employees benefits, but they have to qualify. They have to meet a mandatory, hours on the job or a specific time frame on the job, or make sure that, quote unquote, they don't work under a prescribed number of hours or over certain hours to be eligible for some of the franchise benefits of the corporation. Municipalities are certainly a different entity to consider. But thank you, Ms. Rails, for that Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund question, and Trustee Jones for bringing clarity to that, and Trustee Alexander for alarming us to that ordinance. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on, because there's so much more. We're about halfway through the slideshow presentation talking about the budget. But as you see now on your screen, we have budget increases of 10% or more out of the departments. You have a huge increase from the Public Works Department. I don't see the actual percentage on the ledger here, but as you see, it's a tremendous increase, almost doubling from fiscal year 2025. Code enforcement alike. All right. And again, like I stated, we do have those budgets for both of those departments. Some of the things concerning community engagement, I know it was brought up concerning a potential salary increase, but in the budget, there's information concerning the community engagement department. Currently, they're reflecting an increase of 3% projected to go into that community engagement budget. For those that had an opportunity to watch the budget hearing and the board meeting from that April 22nd, you saw there was a lot of discussion concerning the Maywood Fest. Trustee Brandon, Trustee Jones, you want to touch a little bit on that? And even the newsletter was a particular issue that was kind of interesting also. And citizens, I know you guys have seen throughout the years the evolution of the different village newsletters and communications, and the creation of the community engagement department, as well as have seen good years for Maywood Fest. And then you have other opportunities for youth programming and senior programming in that department. So can you share with us, Trustee Brandon, a little bit about what's really going on in community engagement?
And this is where, this is the new department for the village. The village really never really had a community engagement department. And essentially what it is it's a department that is really like set up to take over the functions of like a park district. A lot of these activities that you see should be coming out of the park district, but a lot of this, is again, being led by the mayor. I think one of the things is a concern for me within the department is, of course, we have the Maywood Fest on there as well, but then you would see under the line item of there's like additional fests that we're spending about $40,000 on as well. And there's no conversations with the board as it relates to kind of like what we would like to see to kind of shape these things. I think that we are doing way too many events, and these are really almost like pet projects, other than, particularly the department as well. And it's just really an extension of, the park district. And this is the department where, I spoke about earlier about, the individual that's overseeing this department is expected to receive this huge raise. And this is the second year. And so my concern was what measurements are we using, or metrics are we using to give out such a raise? Is it fair to the other department heads or employees to, give one person, close to $10,000 increase versus everyone else across the village? And so I most certainly had some concerns about the department. And I think this is an area that most certainly we could see some opportunity to make some cuts.
Okay. As you see on the screen, it shows actually the projected salary, regular salaries in that department from $239,500 to $177,450. A difference of $62,000. But again, as I stated, I don't know where this $10,000 increase or how they're going to compensate or share that information publicly. But as you see, this is the actual proposed budget that CFA has received.
And that includes two different salaries. So out of that salary is the director's salary, and then there is a program manager's salary as well. That is, I believe, close to around 70 to 80,000, somewhere around that amount as well within this budget. Okay. With the director receiving $100 and something thousand dollars, close to $110,000.
Okay, I'm curious to find out also. Speaking of previously, as you know, the village has evolved and changed from a period of time when monies were allocated under the Park and Recreation Department, which ceased to exist in 2007, and the village has had a special events commission that conducted and organized and put on the Maywood Fest. And now it was stated that when Mayor Booker became mayor, that budget was cut, that commission, special events commission, was dissolved. And now you have $100,000 budgeted for the Maywood Fest. There was some discussion on the board at that April 22nd meeting concerning sponsorship and fundraising for the Maywood Fest. Does the Village of Maywood actually allow vendors to underwrite the Maywood Fest, or is it only from the standpoint of vendors purchasing booths and other monies that are generated? Because the only discussion that I think that was brought up was concerning contracting musical artists, and that needed to be done early enough in order to have those headliners perform at the Village Maywood Fest, instead of looking at, is this something that is an ongoing fundraising aspect? Is it handled under the manager's office, or is it collectively through the mayor and the board of trustees?
Yeah, no, it's really handled in the mayor's office. And Trustee Jones can speak to this because I know he brought it up. I know there was a commitment made by the mayor that the festival would not be funded with, I guess, taxpayers' dollars. So he had made a commitment 4 years ago that there would be, fundraising happening and other things happening to offset the cost. And so now we're here with $100,000 budgeted for this event. When he stated or made a commitment that there will be other sources to come in to help fund the fest. We've normally always assisted, somewhere around like $50,000 to help, support and get things going. And then, staff would work to identify, corporate sponsors to come in to offset the costs. So I guess they're, taking a different route this year with it and just put all the funds within the budget without there really being any conversation on what that amount looked like. In the past, the board has discussed how much we would be contributing from a village standpoint and how much we would seek to raise for the additional cost, but that did not happen. And it's all in the community engagement department. And a lot of this happens without any conversation at all, from the board level.
Okay. Generally, I guess, and I think it's great that if the village is able to find a type of sponsorship or underwriters for the Maywood Fest overall, I think that's great. But to budget $100,000 just in case, that sponsorship money or underwriting doesn't come through, I can only imagine what citizens think. If you had an entertainment budget for the year or for a weekend of $100,000, who would you want to see headline at the Maywood Fest?
Yeah, well, and maybe I can, because I, at the board meeting, I was driving a lot of these questions, and I wanted to just clarify something as people are looking at this budget. So if you look at fiscal year 2025, you'll notice that like our expectations were at that time that we were going to hire this individual versus have them be a contract, like a contractor. So that's where you see a reduction in 2026, but you see an increase in the contractual work, and it kind of almost offsets itself. You look at the difference, and there's probably some, other considerations for like, lowering compensation there. But embedded in there is the Department of Community, the department head of community engagement and a project manager. So I wanted to say that. But this community engagement department in general, how did we get here? So when I first got on the board, there was so the village in general did not really do events like that. We would, when I say that, we wouldn't host them outright. Generally speaking, we would support entities like the like for instance, whether it be like Operation Uplift or whether it be like our like our seniors, our old timers. They have different picnics or whatever, and we would support them. And then the Maywood Fest, there was a ad hoc committee that was created under the mayor at the time, and they would manage the resources that we wanted to contribute. The idea was we would, let's say if we wanted to do the fest, right? We would say, okay, the village is going to support, maybe they're going to give us $25 as like float money, because you do need to reserve things and et cetera. But the idea is that we would raise money, people that could underwrite certain things or sponsors. And then at a certain point, we would know what our projected revenues are. And then that effectively is the budget for the fest. There was no safeguard. There was no, okay, well, just in case we have to do this. And so and that was the mayor's promise, because at the time he didn't, well, at least his claim when he wanted to be the mayor was, hey, we shouldn't be using village resources to fund the fest. We need to get sponsors. And so now I think, just with the, it is expensive to throw a 3-day festival and stage equipment and carnivals and, fencing, et cetera. There's just a lot of moving parts. And so the discussion was around, essentially, I believe in the budget, we're not open to reeling things back if we're not raising the right money to fund the fest, versus we're basically saying, well, when in doubt, we'll put it on the taxpayers. And I don't think that's consistent or fair to what I thought the agreement was. So that's where the pushback was, where I thought, okay, maybe we put 50 grand in there as a placeholder, but we need to be on the revenue side saying that we're going to, the fest needs to be profitable. If it's not profitable, then we need to tell the residents that and see if it makes sense to continue to do it. The fest is 3 days, maybe we can make it 2 days. Friday's typically kind of slow. There's many ways to do it. The artist costs, some of the artists that we bring in, they're great, but they are expensive. And so if you don't have an underwriter, it can get expensive. But the one thing I also want to say before I wrap it up is community engagement. How we got here was the former assistant to the mayor, Mayor Perkins at the time, when the new election happened, that person in that role resigned. And Mr. Northfleet his contract was not renewed. And so we had a gap where we didn't have a village manager. That headcount was then used to create this Department of Community Engagement, that department head essentially, to kind of repurpose what was once the mayor's assistant role. And it's now created this hybrid situation where it's still like these undertones of reporting to the board, but it's also, since it is a department, it's supposed to structurally report to the village manager. And so that's where a lot of these events are, essentially being spearheaded by the board, quote unquote, really, the mayor, and kind of segueing that through the department head. And it's really because that's where that headcount came from. And then, the village manager, since that's the culture that they've come into, they just really don't stand firm like, hey, you need to be reporting to me and getting your direction to me. And then the newsletter at one point was a newsletter that was widely, managed by the department heads and the village manager to give information to the residents on what they're working on a monthly basis. It's now transitioned to this community engagement department where, or in this arena where it's, in my opinion, it looks like what it looks like, so I just want to give a little bit of information there.
Can I interject?
Yes, go right ahead, Ms. Brown.
For a lot of the stuff, this community engagement department, we used to have commissions and committees that did a lot of this legwork, who went out and investigated, found out things, and then presented it to the board, who decided whether or not they could fund some of these things. And so most of these were volunteers. And so the role didn't go back to the mayor or to the mayor's office in order to do all these things that have to do with these fairs and recreation and all that kind of stuff. The committees did the legwork. They went out, they talked to the people who were gonna participate, who were gonna bring the fun and the events, and worked out the contracts and went to manage the tents and all that kind of stuff. And the village didn't do that. The commissions did all that work, and then they presented it back to the village board and the mayor and the manager. And we sat down and had meetings with all those people. They eliminated all those commissions who used to do all that work, who used to present the information to the citizens and get information from the citizens to bring to the village as far as what kind of things they wanted, how much it cost, all that stuff. But then they eliminated all those commissions. I know they have some, and I'm wondering, do the board members even listen to that, even as far as the budget is concerned? Yeah. You've got these commissions. The commissions, well, there's still one or two. Do the board members even listen to the recommendation that these commissions present to them?
Trustee Brandon or Trustee Jones, can you address
that? And you're absolutely right. So there used to be a time when the commissions would come before the board to help give insight on matters, and to help us, with our, just decision making, right? It would help do a lot of that legwork. And they've done away with, I would say, about 90%, 95% of the commissions. I'm a strong proponent that we need to get back to bringing citizens to the table, because it helps from a few different aspects when it relates to helping create energy around some of these events that are happening in the community. When it relates to tapping into different networks as well that our citizens may have too. And right now, I think that it, for us, it has increased this budget to the tune of in this particular department in the tune of over $500,000, by, having staff to do it. Most certainly, if you have volunteers, you can see a huge decrease in how much we're spending in this particular department. So there is a huge opportunity. And I think that with the citizens voting to maintain the type of government, the managerial form of government, I think that we should most certainly look at bringing some of these commissions back. We didn't need to do away with the amount of commissions we did away with, and we're seeing the impact of that now. And a lot of things are not being addressed or going by the wayside because we don't have enough people at the table to kind of help us navigate through some of these things.
And I also, if I could just add, just so the residents can follow how we were able to fund this, because you might be thinking, if you were around, back then under that structure, there was always kind of this sentiment that we didn't have a lot of additional resources to do these things. And so in 2021, I believe, the village paid off a bond issuance that we were contributing, about $700,000 a year toward. We paid that off. And so what that did was, instead of, as I mentioned, taking that to the bottom line and using that to reduce our reserve, we essentially used those resources that we didn't have to obligate to this bond, and we funded this community engagement department. And so that's where we're now able to essentially hire contractors and departments to lead things that otherwise were volunteer based, because we didn't have the resources to do it, because those resources back then were being contributed, to that obligation that we had, which stemmed back to work that we did on Fifth Avenue, before my time. And so we took out a bond in order to do that. And so we finally paid it off. And so that cash flow that that the property taxes were contributing through our normal levy to contribute with that, we essentially use those resources to fund this community engagement department. And during this new mayoral transition, there was this tone about the elected officials should take the lead and lead these committees versus the citizens, because the citizens at the time, some of them weren't participating at their full threshold, or they weren't meeting, and part of it was because individuals or these committees didn't have resources to tap in. So a lot of the volunteers essentially would get worn out, or a lot of their ideas wouldn't have much meat on it, because you can't host these tours or meetings, or even have little lunch for people to come, or hire professionals to investigate certain things. So eventually that wears on the volunteers. A lot of volunteers use their own resources, and so that's how we were able to finance, through our general budget, how we were able to just kind of create these resources, was because we paid off that bond, and that money was then freed up to essentially create this department.
So let me just say this real quick. When I was on the board, we took trustees and assigned them with certain commissions as they work with the volunteer residents, and many other municipalities across the United States. That's what they do. A trustee is assigned to that particular group, so they can work with them and bring their objectives and opinions and issues to the board for a board discussion, and that trustee would go back to that particular committee or commission.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And you know what I think the idea behind it was, to be honest and transparent, it's more difficult to tell residents no than it is an elected official, right? And so I think that was one of the ideas, to kind of like have things under one house and have things going through one particular elected official, versus having things to be kind of like fleshed out at the committee and commission level. And so
you're omitting the input of the community members. I mean, you've just taken them off of everything.
Yeah,
and I think no input or say so at all about nothing.
Yeah, I think, and that was the idea behind it, was to be able to create a mechanism or a system where everything flows through one particular individual. Because even as elected officials right now, it is most certainly difficult, even where us chairing these respective committees, to get anything on the agenda. Even if we had an idea or a concept, without it being, just going through so much red tape or having to get the attorney involved. So it's easier to tell, again, an elected official no, but it's difficult to tell a group of residents no, if they have an idea. And so I think that they, remove those guardrails, so to say.
But who's saying no, the mayor or the manager? Because the mayor is elected just like you trustees. It's just a title. They're the president.
Yeah, both as it relates to putting things on the agenda, from our respective committees. That was a idea that I think that I got from the National League of Cities, and it was about educating the residents about the water infrastructure, and it was just so difficult to get on the agenda, first of all, and then when it got on the agenda, it was just a whole lot. So I'm a major fan of having residents to be at the table to help shape policies, and I just think that's just the best way to have it.
Okay. Well, one of the things that you see on your screen now, speaking of the community engagement and community events coming up, they have listed some of the community events that will be budgeted to take place. So citizens, mark your calendars and participate in some of the upcoming events throughout the year, such as the Aztec Fest and Inspire Fest, Caribbean Fest, the Christmas tree lighting, back to school events, Black History Month, Hispanic Heritage celebrations, ribbon cuttings, community meetings, Juneteenth, and honorary street signs, and as well as the Maywood senior picnics that will be going on throughout the year that are proposed to be budgeted.
May I say something before we go on?
Please.
If I heard right, we took money that we took $600,000, I'm just rounding it off, and developed this
community engagement department.
Right. Who does she work for? Does she work for is she in the mayor's office, or is she in the village manager's office?
She's located in the mayor's office, and as a director, she works for the manager, or should work for the manager as a director.
So she should be with all the other directors in Village Hall.
Yeah, she's in Village Hall. The mayor's office is located in Village Hall now, versus where it was above the police department. It's at the end of the
they took the library. They took the library and made it into an office.
Huh?
They took the library and made it into an office.
Yes,
that was
correct.
the library.
Yes.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to know. Well, they're engaged. Okay, the mayor and the director of community engagement, they are engaged. We can see that. But my issue is the way we are communicating to the public. When that newsletter started, Trustee Jones is correct. It was just to inform the community what was happening, what we needed to do from department-wise. This mayor has made it his own coloring book and spending $35,000. What I would like to know, how can a organization like CFA help the three people that does not automatically say, you got my vote? How can we help you guys to kind of disband some of this? This is why it's very important that the people become involved again. I remember at a board meeting, we would have standing room only and not know who they were going to talk about. And a couple of times I was attacked about something that was strictly a human resource issue. But we have to come together to find some solutions, because I don't want this to be another organization. All we do is talk and we don't do anything.
Yeah. So Peggy, to answer your question, the answer is you work through the trustees. So as you know, it's a 7-member board. Things passed by majority. So to the point, I know we've talked about the mayor a lot, or the village manager, but the board has to pass things by majority. And so what that means is, if like, and here's where also I would recommend that community members are reaching out to elected officials, the trustees, but also even the new trustees that are coming in, and giving them what your expectations are in terms of what they're coming across these certain decisions. So how you do that is you say, hey, Trustee Sanchez, or Trustee Ray Williams, or Trustee Jones, or Trustee Brandon, like, you have to hedge your bet amongst all of the trustees, because it takes 4 votes. And then when individuals are not doing what the community favors, then we need to be calling them, emailing them. Like, that's where public comment comes in. You don't have to always show up. You can write an email, but that's where we have to have the confidence to understand that we understand the form of government. And so, ultimately, it takes 4 of you all to agree to this. So it's really about counting and saying, like, who does the community? I mean, because like, these folks are elected in. So I mean, somebody voted for them, right? So somebody should have some relationships with these individuals to say, hey, so I know this decision's coming up. You're looking at the budget. Here's some things that concern me. I would like for you to do X, Y, Z. I mean, that's would be my answer to that.
Yeah. And so, and I concur with you, Ms. Alexander, in regards to how things just used to work. Some of the things that I've witnessed take place would have never taken place, 10, 15 years ago. That's simply because there were more citizen engagement from the board level and from the boardroom level. And so there has to be, an understanding of how, the government works. So we as elected officials work for the people and are responsible to the citizens of the Village of Maywood. But the citizens have to recognize that they are the ones that hold the true power with, some of these things are that are being done. And if they recognize that they hold the power, it's about how you utilize it. And you utilize it by showing up, being vocal. You can't be whispering about these things or whispering about some of these concerns, but you have to show up and speak up so that people, and those, trustees and the mayor, including myself, can hear what your response is. I remember when I first came on, there was a situation where video gaming was coming to the table, and I decided to give the one over on Roosevelt Road a chance and voted on that without checking the pulse of the people, and they came and shouted and screamed, and that was my last time voting on a video gaming situation, because it's all about, at the end of the day, making sure that we're creating a community that the residents want to live in, but the residents got to be involved and be engaged in the process. Yes. In the words of Marcus Garvey, up you mighty race, up you mighty people, and let the recognize that the power is in the hands of the residents if we're going to accomplish what they want us to accomplish as a village government.
Right. And as you see here, as Trustee Jones and Brandon also stated, the involvement aspect, as you see, it is budgeted that the Village of Maywood, under the Community Engagement Department, will sponsor, community events, such as, I hope everyone had an opportunity to get out and show some of your village pride, village-wide. Baton Days coming up, as well as the Thanksgiving food giveaway and employment engagement activities. That was that credit card issue that we found kind of interesting in 2024, where $10,000 were spent appreciating the employees from all their hard work. But our concern and information that we received showed that it was put on a credit card bill and alcohol was served. So I don't know if that was allowable, but it was certainly interesting to see the village taxpayers' dollars being spent for that type of appreciation, as well as things for our youth and combined issues throughout Proviso, such as that wonderful Tour de Proviso. So we see that there's a lot of other opportunities that can be available, but it's up to the citizens, as Trustee Jones and Brandon have stated, to re-involve and re-engage themselves, like Mrs. Brown stated. Yes, Ms. Brown.
Can I just comment on that? Those events are wonderful, and the village needs to have wonderful events. And all these sponsored events are nice, and there are lovely large meetings that I want to say that the village, the mayor and the trustees offer, but I'm not sure whether it's the mayor and the trustees or the mayor and a trustee, because I'm not sure who's represented or whose meeting it actually is. But those are wonderful, and they're nice, and they feed everybody, and all that's good. But what happens at those meetings and at these nice events that I'm glad to see happen, they're all wrapped up in a pretty shiny package, and they're presented to you. You don't have the opportunity to have any input in how you'd like to see them. The meetings that they have that are advertised as a community event, the information is presented to you already decided. So there are no individual meetings where you have an opportunity to go in and say what you'd like to see, because at these meetings, you're given information that you need to digest and take along, but you have no input into how that should change, how it can change, how it will, whether it benefits you or your neighbors, or, you know, would you rather have a 2-day Thanksgiving food giveaway a different way, or what, you know, no input whatsoever. So we need to find a way to have some input into these wonderful events and these large community meetings, where there are actual representatives there that can listen to us and actually take what we say and implement it. Not just listen, but actually implement what we say.
And you're right, and that's on both ends. That's on, you know, and that's why it's hard to really get board participation as well on a lot of these events, because they're done, you know, for you and not with you, like you just stated. And I think that we can do a better job at just being more inclusive from a board perspective and from a residential perspective as well with a lot of these events. And, you know, one of those ways, as we talked about earlier, is bringing back the citizen-led commissions.
Great information. And words of encouragement, Ms. Brown. Thank you. How's your events coming along? Ms. Brown?
Where's my phone? Where is it at?
We can hear you, Chris.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Listen, I went down there and I gave someone in the mayor's office some information about getting people's homes done and stuff. Well, Ms. Banks gave it to the mayor. The mayor, in return, went into Chicago, and he got, I guess, $5,000 per person to go to whom he chose to do. Well, Peter Laporte asked for mold and mildew and stuff like that. They're giving out way more than that. They're coming to your homes. They're looking for mold, mildew. The second half of the program gives you, they call it healthy living, to bring your homes up to code. But, you know, he didn't put that out there. But we do have quite a few people that did listen to me, and they're taking up on this, and they're doing the jobs. So I'm saying he'll take what you say, use it to his advantage, and give it to who he wants to give it to. So, see, I'm not pleased with any of that stuff that he's doing. That's all I have to say about that. I just don't like it.
Okay. Well, we certainly hear your concern, and thank you for sharing information that would benefit, you know, residents and citizens throughout the village. And just keep on keeping on the good fight. And hopefully the messages will get out in the community. We at CFA will continue to do what we can to share this type of information if it's beneficial to the community. We just sent it to us. As you know, the Village Free Press has started back with their community calendar. So please email or send the information to the Village Free Press, and they will certainly publicize that information for free.
Johnny, can we go over some portions of the budget that that Peggy had questions about in terms of these amounts of monies that's being budgeted for 2026? Because I think that's something that some of the people really need to know, how much money they're trying to spend in 2026.
Okay, sure. As we go through each slide, again, we're going back to the actual budgetary information. So now that we've covered community engagement, I think, pretty thoroughly, let's take a look at the code enforcement department. Again, this is a department that is budgeted for almost $2 million, 1.8 $100,049 and $631, increase of 27%. Anything that stands out in that department? I see there was an issue concerning vehicle equipment, $59,000. I don't know if that's related back to the proposed new 2025 Tahoe for the mayor. But anyone care to share information about that?
I would like to ask, when do the board get justifications for the changes? Or do we get a justification? Like, this reflects a 27% increase. Why? You know, what are we doing?
What are they doing different to increase it by 27%?
That new position.
Right. Yeah, the new position is most certainly one of the.
But what type of position is it?
The superintendent.
Yeah, what are these superintendent positions? I mean, have you all gotten a definition as to a job description in terms of what they're supposed to be doing to warrant a superintendent over a department director?
Yeah, and that's an excellent point. No, we haven't. And most certainly, you know, you have one in public works and then another one in code. You know, to me, it seems like, you know, I don't know if we need both and to be in both the departments. That right there is where a lot of the money is at.
Also, and I think there's an underreporting of how much code enforcement is actually taking in from all of those code violations. I've had so many complaints from people of astronomical fines, and, you know, they're taking in a lot of revenue. So if you're going to go ahead and budget all those increases, and based on looking at previous expenditures and cost and income that the code enforcement has taken in, I don't think that the amount that they have on this particular budget is accurate. So I think that really needs to be looked at. Because if you're taking in more money, why do you need such an increase in salary that wouldn't be deferred by all the additional income? Like, for example, it used to be back in the day that code enforcement, anytime you had a vacant building, it was $250 fine for the year. It's now like $350 twice a year.
And also, for instance, like board up fees, board up services from $10,000 to $75,000. What are they boarding up? They're tearing down the buildings.
No question.
Well,
Do they give us, is it mandatory that they give us justifications on any item in the budget, or they just give us numbers?
But that's why you have a budget hearing, so you can ask some of those questions item by item by item.
Yeah, and you're right. They should give justification on, anything in the budget, that merits, justification.
Right, and I think it's been said over and over again in other municipalities, if you're going to have a budget meeting, what you would like to do is show what you did previously and then use that as a justification potentially of why you may need an increase. But in our community, we're missing that big piece of a puzzle. We don't know how much they spent. We don't know how much they're collecting. We don't have an expenditure report. And as it's been said multiple times, we also don't have an audit. So we're operating in the blind.
Hi,
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Gibson.
Okay, there's a $100,000 increase for health and life insurance in the code enforcement department, and so if the trustees can, give some perspective on that, because that's an unusual increase.
Yeah, so so that would imply that we're hiring more full-time employees. You'll also notice too that the contractual professional services went down year over year. So that transition is you're likely seeing the additional cost of the cost of essentially the difference between a contractor and a W-2 employee.
But also with the straight time monies from $680,000 to $834,000, do you know what level of employees they're talking about hiring? I mean, are they laborers? Is this for this top superintendent job or what? I mean, you need to know where this money is supposed to be and how much they're planning on paying them, because the job is supposed to be posted.
Right. Yeah. So, in theory, I think the questions that you all are asking are important. What is supposed to happen is that there's supposed to be a meeting where the department heads stand up in front of the community and explain these differences, right? Because they're leading that department. They're essentially the ones that are asking for these things, saying, hey, like, our residents, we need more of your money to execute on X, Y, and Z. And I think someone mentioned, because what we were looking at was just the expense side. Typically, you'd want to rationalize hiring more people because you're essentially you're going to have a return on that investment through, fees that you're assigning, or, you can rationalize that. And so we have not gotten that clarification at that level, which is, we deserve, because this is our money. And so I think that's where we have to come in and just demand those answers from. Really, it should be the village manager. The village manager, he's the budget officer. So he's supposed to be the expert as it relates to the use of our village resources. And he's, he should be the person that can explain this and have comfort around why this is the best use of those funds.
And also demand, when you ask the question, that the answer comes from the village manager and not the mayor.
Correct. Okay, well, this is the Code Enforcement Department. As you see, there's some, as it was stated, some wonderful questions and concerns concerning this. I guess one of the interesting things that I noticed is that in many of the line item accounts for expense activities under gas, I know we're going to get to it towards the end of the PowerPoint presentation, but can you share with us some insight or clarify what is going on with not the motor fuel tax, but what's going on departmentally when it comes down to how the village fleet is being managed and how they're paying for fuel for the vehicles or equipment?
Yeah, I can answer this, or this is what was communicated by the finance director. So you'll notice that under vehicle maintenance and fuel, that cost has been consolidated under the public works department. And so what you should notice in the other departments is that the budget line item for, I believe, gas and vehicle maintenance, if I'm not mistaken, maintenance vehicles should be excluded from the budget, and then that should all be consolidated under one of these departments. Where's public? Yeah. So
this is public works.
Yeah. And then we should be seeing that as well under vehicle maintenance. And so, yeah, like that, like those other things need to be kind of laid out a little bit more transparently, just to itemize it, and so we can understand what's going on, because that's a difference in how we've typically managed those funds. That doesn't necessarily mean it's not right or wrong, but what it does mean is that those expenses that are coming from throughout the organization are going to be fueling through public works, and the effort was supposed to, from a cost perspective, fiscal was supposed to reduce costs, but ultimately it may lend itself to lack of transparency, because you're kind of cutting out numbers and then putting one big number in another department. It's hard to understand. Like, was that a 1-for-1, or did we bake in, some other maintenance, stuff that, we're not being transparent about? And so that's where, we like to ask questions that those department heads and village managers should be very comfortable with those answers.
But Trustee Jones, how can you put all of that in this department, this $252,500, when you have the fire department that runs all the time, you have the police department running 24 hours a day with vehicles, and how can you justify in this department that only works, I mean, sometimes, it's all day, but I'm just saying, there is no way with the cost of gas that you can only go up by $152,000 for all departments with vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question for our village manager.
Because we need to know how much it's costing us in the police department and how much it's costing us in the fire department just to operate the vehicles that cover the village.
Yeah, well, so as I was mentioning, I still think you can itemize, even if we're consolidating under one department for, whatever reason, you can still itemize, say, hey, this is under public works, but, here's where we're saying, these associated costs are coming from. The idea and what was explained to me is that the public works department will be facilitating the management of things with the effort of, kind of reducing costs if we're consolidating those efforts. But that was something that, again, our village manager who executes our day-to-day has to explain that to us, right? Because the board didn't decide to do that. That was the manager. And so that's where, again, the community has to lend, has to, really expect for the manager to say, hey, so I noticed you did X, Y, and Z. Can you explain to us why that was appropriate and how we can get the visibility that we need?
But also, I mean, gas is budgeted in the police department and the fire department in terms of what they have to operate. And you can't, put their money over in this department and say, well, they're going to manage and we're going to spread it out. That does not work. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Again, this is just proposed, but thank you, Trustee Jones, for providing that clarity regarding how they are consolidating that type of activity, whether it's vehicle maintenance and fleet vehicle fuel and the like under the Public Works Department. I guess the question many citizens have, even concerning the new superintendent that it's coming into that department, the question currently, I know that has come up from the past board meeting, and CFA looked at many bid wavering opportunities that have been contracted with outside, without a process of basically sending out RFPs and the urgencies for some of these no bid contracts that have been awarded specifically under the Public Works Department. And how is that functioning, without giving clear explanation or direction or even verifying if some of these businesses are legitimate businesses? Or maybe that's just
and really the most critical part is, making sure that you're getting a bang for your buck, really, right? By making sure that things are competitively bidded out. And so when you're constantly waiving it, it don't allow for that to take place. And then it almost, creates opportunities for corruption to happen as well. Which is concerning too. And I think something was stated at the board meeting in reference to having relationships with,
I heard that word too many times.
With certain vendors, and that should never be. This is not a mom and pop type of operation. There are processes in place that we should be following as a board and as a community, and they're there for a reason, right? They're there to help ensure that there's some safeguards and that folks are not, giving these, contracts to whomever, but who's best for the job and who's going to give the best rate for the job as well. And so that's another reason why I would most certainly caution the board from continuing to operate in this manner as well, because it just opens the door for so much malfeasance to take place.
Fraud, waste, and abuse.
Yeah.
Right. And isn't there an ordinance? I think it was at one time, I don't know if it's still there because things have changed since I left, that says that any jobs over a certain dollar amount must have bids. And when those bids come in, you all decide what you want to do. You determine where you want to waiver the bids, the waiving a bid process. There used to be an ordinance for a certain dollar amount.
And it's still on the books, but I think they've got into a habit of considering everything to be an emergency.
Yeah, right.
Remodeling is not
remodeling the police station is an emergency, and the bids were waived on that.
Well, speaking of that, I have a question for Trustee Jones and Trustee Brandon specifically regarding that. As you know, the village board had voted to approve, and when I say village board, I don't mean unanimously. The simple majority of the board voted to approve a contract with the Oak Park Regional Housing Center. And part of that contract, it stated that the Oak Park Regional Housing Center now will basically review as well as submit all RFPs and proposals for the Village of Maywood. And I thought that was kind of interesting that the board would approve an outside entity of doing something internally that either the manager, the finance department, or the contracted attorney, or the community development director would have a process in doing. Was that something that was just outsourced because of relationships, or how do you justify that type of transparency?
And this was most certainly concerning, especially with this particular organization, with its background as well. And it, anybody could, Google, some of the I guess, negative energy that surrounds this particular agency. And I spoke to the manager about this last week as well. And his response was, well, we're moving in a different direction, as it relates to, and I don't know how that was, because normally you include the board when anything changes. Like I told him, within the operations of how we're operating, the board is included in those conversations so that we're not blinded by anything. And I just think that this is, again, one of those situations where, we're just freestyling, and he, didn't have a lot of information on this particular agency. But we, for those who know how they arrived in Maywood, and it's know who they're connected with as well, which is unfortunate.
Okay.
Which is unfortunate.
All right. So, any other questions or?
I have one.
Yes.
In this slide, do anyone know it says new positions? Everything is so put together where there's no okay, this is what we're going. Wait a minute. Okay, it says new hire. Do we know what positions are going to be new hires? Do we know? Are we going to get a mechanic since we're not going to widget anymore? These contractual, the capital expenditures. What are we talking about? That's what I'm saying. We just have numbers and titles. We don't have any particulars about each one of these.
Well,
am I missing something?
Well, I think, of course, it's not accidental, it's intentional, because if you're vague, if you lump a bunch of information together, the average community, isn't going to do the deep dive into finding out what that actually means. And I just feel with the current administration operating the way it is, that's going to have a situation where people are willing to do the work to figure out, what that means. So if you're talking about new hires and they're not even posting it, for us to come up after that and find out who's being hired, I mean, unfortunately, or probably fortunately, unless we do the work, it's not going to happen. At least I don't feel like it's going to be just given to us.
And some of like the new hires, they are listed. So I know that there is a superintendent in the code, one in public works. There's a laborer.
Are they listed in the budget?
In a breakdown that was provided to us, they were listed, those positions.
Oh, okay.
But is it going to be revealed to the community?
It most certainly should.
Yes, if you request detail, they'll give it to you.
Right, but I guess my question is, and I don't want to be argumentative, we have to do a lot. And I'm saying that if your freedom of information, if it's information that's being freely shared or potentially shared with the board members, then why isn't the information that we get transparent? Because truth be told, this budget that we have, it had to be requested rather than it to just be freely posted.
And the information that is posted is after the fact. Yeah, they'll share it after it's already done.
Yes, because the job should be posted before they are filled. Give everyone an opportunity to apply for them.
I think the job at least should be listed in the board package that people know, the trustees know that we're going out for this position. We're going to have someone.
But usually your village hall has a board where they put postings for jobs. Even the public can come in and see what they are, what the job duties are, and what the salary is going to be.
Well, I think it goes without saying that the user experience when it comes down to navigating information on the Village of Maywood website is interesting. An interesting cyber maze to find the specific information that you're looking for outside of certain information that's prominently presented. As you stated, that a CFA person had to actually FOIA the budget. It wasn't readily available on the clerk's office. It wasn't readily available on the clerk's website. It was not available on the finance director's website, and nothing was posted concerning it. I find it even interesting that even with the April 30th upcoming public hearing for the budget, the agenda does not even include, quote unquote, the budget information that we're sharing with you today. So we just appreciate everybody's taking time out this evening to get on this call and to, just be a little bit more concerned about what's happening and what's going on. I'll go to the next slide. This also relates back to contractual services under the Public Works Department. Ms. Sharp, I do not see the program that you were sharing with the residents, but hopefully in the future, Trustee Jones and Trustee Brandon will meet with you to certainly get that out and have it available for the residents. Capital projects. Okay, I'm sure everyone has enjoyed the Water Reclamation District Green Alley plan. I have seen that. If not, it will be coming to you soon. The ADA transition plan, the Connor House Memorial Park Phase 1, the Madison and Oak 19th Avenue project, as well as.
Oh, he put pictures out on that this morning on Facebook.
All right. Okay. Trustee Jones or Brandon, can you speak to any of these upcoming capital projects? And the capital meaning basically long-term invested projects in the community.
Yeah, I could speak to the ADA transition plan. And so the village was sued because of the sidewalks across the village not being ADA compliant, right? And so the village had to come up with a transition plan to transition those sidewalks that were out of compliance. There was someone in a wheelchair that was unable to navigate because of a particular sidewalk in town. And so this kind of turned the gears up to be able to address those sidewalks that were out of compliance throughout the village. and it's really like the curb way that was out of compliance. And so there's a lot of work in this area that is needed across the village, as well as the a lot of sidewalks that need to be repaired that we are out of compliance with. And so I've requested that we do an assessment across the village of all of our sidewalks because some of them are in horrible condition. And then 19th Avenue, this is getting started now, is to repair the street over on 19th Avenue, which is something that we planned years ago to do. Now have the resources to be able to move it forward. And then I don't know if Trustee Jones want to chime in on the kind of Heights upgrades that's going to be made to that park.
Yeah, I can chime in. So the basketball court within Connor Heights Memorial Park that was named after the two young men that were from Maywood that passed away, and during the march, the Baton Death March, that basketball court back in 2020 was named in honor of the Doc Rivers and his family, and so that came with a contribution from him and from a local business to replace the actual basketball units on the court. And then this capital project is going to be phase one of what's supposed to be a larger project for the entire park. But phase one is to focus on the basketball courts, which would I have not seen the complete scope of work, but from my understanding, it's going to consist of some kind of like surface, digging up the surface and leveling it out, to prevent or to encourage good drainage, those type of considerations, fencing, benching, just kind of having that be more of a state-of-the-art outdoor facility. So I'm really excited about that, and more to come on that during the process.
I will say, for those that either attend the board meetings in person or watch online, this is a project that's near and dear to Trustee Jones's heart. He's been hammering in on this for at least 6 months just to get an update. So it's glad to see that there's progress going on the Connor Heights Park.
Thank you, Donnie, for acknowledging my effort. And to Trustee Brandon's point, it is challenging to get input or get some of these things into the budget. So I was happy to see that this was an investment that the village is going to make in support with some private partnership, and we're looking to continue that with that development. But it does show that if you're advocating for something, if you go through the right channels, you still can get things done. But we're at the point where we have to put more muscle behind it. But there's still avenues if you're working through those trustees and the village manager.
Right. Well, let's make sure it maintains to be your project.
Well, although I initiated it, at the end of the day, it's for the community, and I wanted, the return on investment is for the youth and for the visitors. Just so you know, one of my, and I won't speak too much onto this, but one of my kind of individual trustee initiatives coming to the board is to draw tourism into the village by leveraging our assets and our brand of a lot of historic homes and civil rights leaders and people that have made strides in medicine and music and even sports, to leverage that brand to bring traffic to our community, positive traffic that gives them an excuse to learn more about our community based on the narrative that we've created, and to essentially spend money, to get gas, to get food, to shop, and we're developing that. But part of the idea behind that, and Doc, fortunately enough, donating that money is even leverage his brand. Maywood is known for a lot of things, but we are known for our athletes that have made great strides at the professional level. And so if that gives a reason for folks to want to come to our community and play basketball, and then from there hopefully and have a positive experience from the town, that's what we want to encourage.
Awesome.
Can I say one thing, please? When these projects are advertised or just recited to the community, would you some way put the starting date? Because personally, I am tired of the mayor taking credit for things that take 10 years to do.
Right. That's been on the books already.
And it is because there is no one talking back saying, no, you didn't do that. That project was put in the works in 1990, whatever it takes. These federal projects take a long time, but they come into
fruition under certain mayors, and then that mayor gets all the credit.
Yeah, and they would have you to believe that Maywood is not operating with any plan. There was no plan in place. There was no comprehensive plan. That things were just happening, and there wasn't a plan. There's always been a plan in place for this community. It's been updated over the years, and staff have been operating within what that comprehensive plan as it relates to what you see happening along the First Avenue corridor. We all know, and for those who been in Maywood a long period of time, know that the traffic count along First Avenue calls for commercial development, to give people reasons to stop, to stay, and to spend in a village based on the traffic flow along First Avenue. That's been a conversation before my time, well before my time.
Yeah.
And so they would have you think that all of these things are new, and that it's just now happening just because, and there wasn't a plan in place. There was always a plan, and even talks about this whole idea about bringing the Village Hall back to Fifth Avenue. That was always a part of the conversation, simply because we know that in order to create the synergy that's needed to create this downtown concept or idea, the more traffic you have coming to Fifth Avenue, It's the same situation like First Avenue. It will bring, the additional development that's needed to lighten up, Fifth Avenue as well. There's always been a plan in place for the community. And it's just about how fast things have, gotten done. But, like Trustee Jones mentioned earlier, it's simply because of the opera funds that we've received, the $3.5 million, as well as us dealing with that bond, clearing up that bond that the village had out there as well, which freed up some additional resources that they are now able to tap into. Almost like a little bit of, especially the 3.5 million, a little bit of a rainfall they're able to tap into to expedite some of these projects, like Trustee Jaycox and Trustee Peggy Alexander mentioned, that's been on the table for a while. You're just able to expedite it because you got the additional resources as well.
All right. Now, one of the things that you see on your screen, thank you, Trustee Brandon and Trustee Jones and Ms. Alexander and Jaycox for that insight. What you see on your screen now is regarding the motor fuel tax. And this is an allocation that is taxed on motor vehicles that travel on the public highways based upon the consumption of motor fuel. And that allocation is used for improvement in construction and maintenance of the transportation infrastructure. Going back to what Trustee Brandon was stating, the streets, as you know, have always needed to be in some state of repair. Alleys, it's great to see that there is a composite plan still ongoing to pave the alleys and the ways, but making sure that that information is done properly and in order and not rushed so that other funds will not have to be reallocated is, again, part of the composite planning of the board, of the manager, the departments, as well as informing the citizens. So just want to share that information with everyone. Let's take a look at a very interesting fund that the village has, the recreation fund. Basically, still, the Village of Maywood levies $150,000 from the recreation or from property taxes into a recreation fund. As you know, CFA, we took a look at this based upon just the 2023 audit and found that, yes, $150,000 is still being appropriated into this recreation fund. However, that fund is currently over $1.1 million in debt. And we received an update from the expenditures out of that fund, and we'll be sharing that with the public very soon. So Trustee Jones and Trustee Brandon, can you talk a little bit about the recreation fund and what's going on with that?
I can chime in on it a little bit. So those funds are to for the purpose of the 200 building and for the pool. That's it's the village's responsibility to oversee. And so over the past a few years, it has went to support other initiatives. Whether it be utilizing the pool over at Proviso East as like a replacement of the Freyhampton pool not being open. And so, and for the maintenance costs over at the 200 building as well. So that's the purpose of why the village, continue to utilize that fund for both the pool and the 200 building.
Okay, all right. So, and everyone, as you all know, and this is another issue that that CFA has shared back with the community concerning the recent issue from November of 2025, the non-binding referendum that was on the ballot to transfer, quote unquote, or ask the question, should the Village of Maywood transfer its or dissolve the Maywood Park District and transfer its parks and facilities over to the Village of Maywood. We countered that information by fact checking to inform the mayor that referendums do not expire and that the 2006 referendum that unanimously passed to consolidate the parks in the Village of Maywood under the Village of Maywood Park District, and those funds would have been transferred as well as facilities. Almost 20 years later, we see that still has not taken place. I don't want to delve too much into that, but just to let you all know that the Village of Maywood still maintains this recreation fund, and it was just curious to us how it still runs up a deficit. Okay. And Ms. Van Diver, you had a statement regarding the alleys.
Yeah, I was feeling I'm here chatting away with people in the chat, and they have a lot of good comments and questions. But Eileen Olivier brought up a good point about the alleyways. Her question was whether or not, because the way it was, there were 64 alleys that had not been paved. So the board in August and September, by a 4-3 majority, approved the temporary paving of the alleyways. So Miss Olivier or Eileen asked the question of whether there was any future plans to turn those into green alleyways. And I had just stated that during that same meeting, Booker, because he was part of the 4 that voted in favor of the temporary alleyway, said that the plan was for it to be a temporary fix, but Trustee Jones and Brandon can back me up on this. But the other side's argument was, okay, you say it's a temporary fix, but for how long? And so Booker said years, because they didn't have the $20 million, because it's $250 per green alleyway. They didn't have the $20 million that was needed to be able to do it the right way and do concrete green alleyways. So
what was concerning about the what was done to the alleys. First and foremost, the alleys are not paved. It's almost certainly a temporary fix as it relates to the material that they use for the alleys. But what was concerning to me was that the engineers, the village engineers, our engineering consultants, were not involved or not at the table as related to the material that they use and how the alleys were being done. And to go even further, recommended against it. This is something that previous administrations could have done, but it wasn't the right way to do it. And it was just basically just throwing something down. And it really, the quality of work of how it was done, it wasn't even quality. What they did when they laid it down, it wasn't even fixed, because I was responding to residents across the village to come out to look at how it was even laid down as well, and how thin of the material was as well. And so, it was most certainly, a situation where let's just do something just to say something that was done. But, residents, must understand that their alleys, that are not paved, it's not the right material for those alleys. There was no plumbing situation done to any of those alleys either. And then the other thing is, if that material gets inside of the water, most certainly could have an impact on that as well. So I was concerned that the engineer wasn't involved in this, and most certainly they should have been involved because of the material that was utilized.
Wow. Well, that's one of the things, again, that I think many citizens and residents certainly could appreciate the intent and effort. However, the cost involved, and if, quote unquote, the work was not properly supervised, graded, or evaluated, or the engineers, based upon their recommendation, voted against it. But again, you see, it takes citizens outside of that simple majority to push forth that project for publicity's sake. Hopefully the village will not have to revisit that in the near future, but eventually I'm sure that it will. Okay. And it was mentioned about the ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan Act grant, and how those funds will be used as far as the projected information. Can you talk a little bit about how those projects are selected under the ARPA grant?
Well, and Trustee Jones was the chair of the Finance Committee. I was the co-chair actually when we set the budget for those funds and how they was going to be utilized. And a great portion of those funds, when we originally put the budget in place, the resources were going back to the residents, those who were impacted by COVID-19. And so what the mayor did was, what the board, I won't say the mayor, what the board majority did was came back and gutted pretty much everything. So we have, resources going to residents for home improvements, as well as, through a home improvement grant program, which I brought to the table, of a program that was implemented in the city of Chicago under the Mayor Lori Lightfoot administration, as well as resources to support our business community as well, to ensure that they had some resources on those most certainly who were impacted by COVID-19. And all those things were pretty much gutted, and they decided to do other things with the cars, that was just not really in line with what the purposes and use of those funds were truly meant for, which was to help people and businesses recover from the pandemic. And so I was, most certainly saddened to see how they, utilize those funds. I think we have about $300,000, even in this budget, that doesn't have a breakdown of how those dollars are going to be used. And under it just has, I believe it's programs and initiatives. Well, what are those programs and initiatives, right? And so just concerned about how we implemented those dollars, and we could have, really made a bigger impact if we would put those dollars where they was needed the most. And so, there's still, again, in this budget, about $300,000 that I would just advocate the residents to, help advocate that those dollars go where they need the most, and that's to help people and businesses kind of, recover or make improvements that's necessary to them. And Trustee Jones could chime in a little bit as well, because he put in a lot of work in the budget.
May I ask a question? Who manages those grants on a day-to-day basis?
Well, in this case, it would be the manager and finance director.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would add to that is we received those resources from the federal government back in 2020. Again, in response to the pandemic, the federal government gave all municipalities resources to recover. And so we were obligated through that process to do certain community surveys and other things to get the community's input. And so we utilized that information to then leverage what the community said that they wanted to see, which was, like certain programs around, Trustee Brandon mentioned the home improvement program. There was also the Ring doorbell program to get more security in certain areas where we were seeing, whether it be higher activity of crime or what have you. There was resources also assigned for capital improvements and assets that, because the village also needs to recover from, from the pandemic, because there were certain resources that we didn't receive or that were delayed. And so the idea is that we were going to split those resources. About half of it was projected to go to businesses and nonprofit organizations like the Chamber of Commerce and the Way Back In and Operation Uplift to help support their functions, as they support the community. But that was essentially trumped, no pun intended, by, other board members that saw different use of those resources. So that's how we, kind of got there. And one thing I would want to say too, just about going back to the alleys thing, when we say we don't have the money, a lot of times it's all about framing. So the village might not have $20 million to do every single alley in the village, but as we can see, based on certain spending we've had for SUVs and for festivals, et cetera, we could most surely address, more than what we're doing. I think it's about the community saying, no, this is more of a priority than that. And, instead of saying what we don't have, we're going to tell you what to do with what we do have, and prioritize that. And so, and when you do assign more resources to these capital projects, excuse me, it gives you an opportunity to seek grants where you need matching funds. Most grants aren't 100% where, they're going to fund capital improvements. They're usually looking for whoever is seeking those resources to have skin in the game. Essentially, usually no one's going to support your project more than the entity itself. And so we need to have those resources available so we can seek out those grants. So, instead of paying, $300,000 per alley, maybe we could pay half, with some sort of matching grant. And so I would just kind of challenge us to just maybe not necessarily accept that framing, because we obviously have resources available. It's really about prioritizing it. And then when we need to, finance or consider financing things, that's where it's important to reduce your deficit and have a good bond rating and et cetera, so you can weigh your options.
And I'd like to interject. Trustee Jones brought up a good point, and I think it piggybacks on something that Deborah had mentioned. She had a question about what happened in reference to the Fred Hampton's pool and who potentially was in control of it. But what a lot of residents don't know when they complain about why has the pool been down so long and why it hasn't been fixed, that had to do with being able to be a part of a matching program and then the extent of work that needed to be done on the pool. Like case in point, I believe it was an OSLOD grant that the village or the park district had been awarded to help be able to do some of the work at the pool, but it was a matching program. But just like I think Trustee Jones had said, about a month ago, because the extent of work that needed to be done, it needed more than just a liner, it needed more than just a pump, that matching program grant was something they weren't able to take advantage of just because of the extent of the work that needed to be done. But that's a perfect opportunity where matching programs, we are expected to put some skin in the game to be able to get access to some of the capital that's out there.
And that particular grant, actually, there really it was a time frame in which we needed to spend it. So it wasn't really a matching grant. They had awarded the village about $350,000, somewhere around that amount. And of course, then the pandemic happened, and so the pool needed some additional work. But we've asked the village to have someone that is a consultant to come out to evaluate that pool, and we never really got really hard numbers on what it would take. All of it was like verbal conversations that came from the mayor of what the cost would be, but nothing in writing to say that to make the necessary repairs on the pool is going to cost the village $1 million, so that the board could say, well, how can we do this? What means do we have? What resources do we have that we could add the additional funds? So we have $350,000. What can we get the remaining costs from to make the necessary repairs to the pool? That never happened, and it hasn't happened today. We still don't have a real idea of what the repairs are and what the cost of it is either. And that's something that we've been asking for the past 4 years. And so most certainly the village should have put those funds to use. I remember when we went down to Springfield, and this is prior to Booker becoming mayor, but we got those funds back around 2021, somewhere around the time frame, and staff had to go down to Springfield to compete for those funds because there were other communities that were at the table. We had to present a whole proposal and things of that nature. But most certainly, it was just, I think, a few things. A lot of confusion happening as it relates to Village Hall, and we could not meet the deadline as it relates to the deadline that was established to spend those funds. And that was actually when Chastity Wells Armstrong was the village manager at the time. And there was a lot of confusion happening, and we just got away from being able to see that those funds were utilized. And they just notified us, that we're sending this money back to the state because we're not going to be able to use it in time enough. And that was a whole narrative. Now the narrative is we're building this indoor complex situation, and it's going to be about a $30 million project. We don't know where we're going to get the funds from. We're not up to date with any with our audits or anything of that nature. You don't know what our bond rating is or any of those things, right? And it's so many different these grandiose projects on the table. It can convolute everything. You talk about the Village Hall and a sports complex, and all of these different things. The village board needs to come together and have a clear plan of what it's going to do, and everybody needs to be on the same page with how that's going to happen.
Okay. Trustee Brandon. My question is there no when these things are proposed, whether it's the $30 million complex or the pool, is there no timeline, or like you said, there was no assessment, or nobody brought in to determine what the pool actually needed and then give a written proposal of what that would take so you could compare that to the pros and cons of a $30 million event complex?
No. The answer to that is no. It is something we've been requesting, like, bring in, the folks who are experts in this space to allow them to let us, get a deep understanding of what the conditions are. And that's really all of our village assets across the village, is what I've been requesting, to just have a, just an understanding of what our buildings, what conditions they are in, and just having a full asset. But specifically to the pool, I just was laser focused on it because the residents, been talking about it. And, we've asked and still didn't get what we needed as it relates to, okay, what are the true costs associated with making the necessary repairs, because we have this opera money, right? Could we use some of that coupled with a grant maybe to make the necessary repairs to get the pool open, up and operating, right? And so I just don't think there is a clear plan in place. There's a lot of conversations, what I call water cooler conversations, but nothing at the board level where the board has come to an agreement to say this is the direction we collectively want to move in, and this is how we're going to get there. All of these conversations
who would be responsible? What department would be responsible? And then I'll yield back to the group.
It's the board really giving direction to the village manager on the direction in which we want to go. But there hasn't been a collective conversation to set forth a collective vision for making anything happen as it relates to a pool or even the village hall conversation. A lot of these conversations have happened outside of the council chambers when they should be taking place inside those council chambers, so that not only we can trace what we're saying, but the people can trace what's happening and what deadlines and timeframes are put in place for these things as well.
And one of the things speaking towards that, Miss Olivier as well as Miss Larry bring some interesting insights concerning, the communication back out to the citizens. And Miss Olivier stating that the newsletter should be focused on residents and our direct issues and not propagandizing. Miss Larry states that those dollars, I think she's referring back to the ARPA funds, should have gone towards residents and local businesses that are impacted by COVID. And again, I don't know if residents have had an opportunity to take a look at some of the ordinance when it comes to the expenditures from those ARPA funds, but CFA certainly, we plan to share that information with the residents. I know previously there was a question by residents, former Mayor Perkins at a couple of board meetings challenged the board to support local nonprofits and local businesses that were truly impacted by COVID instead of what the current expenditures from those funds have gone to.
I would encourage this group too to take a look at the folks who've been selected. Because there was a open, I guess, application. I don't know who was open to, but there's a list of individuals who were selected to receive $10,000 to $15,000, and some of those individuals most certainly should cause for some concern about how they got selected and why they were even on the list altogether.
Okay, and as we all know, these are very challenging and interesting times. And as we see, I don't know if Maywood needs a department of efficiency, but as you see, the federal grants fund, they're projecting a decrease of $2.1 million. So we certainly appreciate Trustee Brandon, Trustee Jones, and other citizens using their resources to bring worthy programs and opportunities back to the community and sharing it with everyone alike. And if the collaboration between the village and other municipal bodies, can move these things forward. I know one of the things that other residents have shared back with me is that, some of these so-called feasibility studies, whether it is for a sports complex or other, promises or projections or wish lists for the Village of Maywood, have never seen the light of day yet and have not been updated. So as I stated, even with the Connor Heights Park, I certainly can appreciate, the trustees, continuing requesting it publicly, and then behind the scenes, pushing for public information to be shared back out with the community. So let's go ahead and move on. I know it's been a long evening. We've touched on the ARPA.
Excuse me, can I add something to going back to the swimming pool situation?
Yes.
And isn't that further complicated by the fact that it hasn't been decided who owns the swimming pool? Is it the Park District or is it the Village of Maywood? And the Park District and the Village of Maywood entered into an intergovernmental agreement. Where does that stand in terms of, how this swimming pool situation was supposed to be handled or could be handled or whatever?
I think back when I was on the board and we had the intergovernmental agreement, the pool was going to be kept by the village because of that park, because of the land that the pool was on. And that parcel was never part of the Park District.
And that is correct. So the pool, as well as the 200 building, was not part of the agreement as it relates to the Park District and the Village of Maywood's agreement to transfer over recreational responsibilities to the Park District. Because of the police department sit on that land, that was one of the reasons as well. And most certainly, the 200 building was never going to be transferred over either. So those two properties were going to always remain under the wheelhouse or in the wheelhouse of the Village of Maywood.
Okay,
I will share, Ms. Cole, one moment. I will share this also. One of the things I find interesting over the years since the 2006 referendum is that there have been many discussions, many dialogues, but as of recent, the last two intergovernmental agreements that were made between the Park District and the Village of Maywood was not reflective of, quote unquote, the Park District management, but individuals who were aligned with, quote unquote, turning over the management. And I take issue with those who say who owns, public spaces or public buildings. The citizens own them. I think the municipal bodies, are just caretakers, managers, and and somehow it gets kind of construed as far as mine and thine and us, instead of focusing in on, the proper caretakers of these entities. So just to kind of clarify one thing, that I think the intergovernmental agreements that were signed in 2021 and 2022, respectfully, it talked about number one, the transferring finally, and secondarily, it talked about the management agreement of the pool and, quote unquote, the 200 building by the quote unquote Park District. Now that did have an expiration date and a clawback clause. So, but again, the will of the people, in my opinion, rather, still has not been fulfilled. Thank you, Ms. Van Diver, for also adding the OSLAD matching funds information, the open space lands acquisition and development grant information. Maybe there's a potential opportunity to revisit that at another point in time by the Village of Maywood, but thank you for providing that information. Again, we only wanted to basically share sort of like an overview of the proposed budget, encouraging citizens to, get involved, to speak up or speak out for your concerns or curiosities. As you see, some of the proposed uses of those ARPA funds that the Village of Maywood manager is proposing to the board features a security camera program, homeowners improvement initiatives and programs. That's very broad in general, and something related to the ceasefire building. Okay, Trustee Jones or Brandon, would you care to elaborate on any of those?
Well, we spoke about the homeowner improvement program. This is a program that when Trustee Jones was the chair for the finance committee, I advocated for the homeowner improvement program off a program that was created by Mayor Lori Lightfoot in the city of Chicago. And we mirrored it off that particular program, as well as the security camera program as well. There was an uptick in violence in some of the areas, specifically a young lady got killed in the village. And this initiative came up in another town, and thought it was a good idea to get residents involved in helping to, create a sense of safety throughout the community. And now the initiative and programs, this is where we were speaking of earlier, where this is where the $300,000 is at. That is not allocated to anything. It's very broad, and it almost gives like someone's personal piggy bank to allow someone to do whatever they feel like they want to do with it. And these are the funds that most certainly need to be designated and broken down and with a clear purpose as well. The ceasefire building, there was some repairs that was needed with the old ceasefire building location. But to my understanding, we received a grant from Cook County that was supposed to replace the funds that we had allocated for this to make those necessary repairs. And so that those dollars were going to go back into the budget. And so that's pretty much a brief breakdown of it. For the homeowners improvement program, people were selected for that program. I don't think it was marketed like it should have been. Most certainly to those who are in dire need of some additional assistance to their homes. And the major focus was our senior community. And to see some of the names that are on this list is most certainly very much concerning as it relates to some of those names that are slated to receive anywhere between $5,000 and $15,000.
Where can you get the list?
From the village, yeah. And I could provide a copy of it as well.
Okay. We have a question from Ms. Olivier regarding the security camera program. Will this include additional red light cameras within the village?
No, this was specifically actually for cameras on like homeowners' homes, right? And so it was like the new cameras, like the Ring doorbell cameras that people have on their homes. This was specifically for that.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that question, Ms. Olivier. Now, I think we can kind of skip through the sewer garbage fund, but fortunately, there's a increase. And I guess that fund will include, but not limited to, the pump station operations, water and sewer maintenance. Hopefully, some of these contracts that will be properly bidded out to include local bidders or local companies that are qualified to do that work. And as you see, just a analysis when it comes down to the water, sewer, and garbage fund. And as we go through, we get to another interesting quagmire in the Village of Maywood, and that's concerning the existing TIFs. And we hadn't touched on the proposed new TIFs. I didn't see anything concerning that in the newly proposed budget for the fiscal year. But The Madison Street TIF is still in existence. And as we see, some of the programs to be allocated or allowed under the required activities under the law that can take place when expending TIF funds, such as to stimulate investment in blighted areas of the Village of Maywood that have been designated to need economic revitalization.
What are they going to do?
Exactly. Okay. Well, this is how they project the breakdown. 2.4 million out of the TIF fund to go towards roadway improvements. 667,000 plus for contractual and professional services. And remember, the village manager is the TIF administrator. I understand that citizens still can sign up to be interested parties to receive firsthand information concerning any activities and ongoing in the TIFs, plans, proposals, applications to receive monies out of the TIF for some of those allowable activities. Okay, but one of the interesting things that I find curious is that property acquisition, $600,000 out of the Madison Street TIF. I noticed that in the last board meeting, there was a proposal from the Historical Commission and to create the early Maywood Historic District, okay, along Madison through Fifth Avenue. But the other side of that, we haven't touched on properties that are currently owned by the Village of Maywood and the loss of potential tax revenue that's not being generated because those properties are possibly not remarketed, resold to private owners, as well as you know, if those properties are owned by the land bank, every transaction costs the village an additional $5,000. So we also have seen previously in the budget of Public Works, the board up increased fees. So are these, you know, targeted area, or if the Madison Street TIF is a targeted area for acquiring properties, boarding up properties, or even how are some of these programs coming into place in the Village of Maywood so that those tax dollars that normally would go to the schools, go to the library, go to the parks, you know, would be used otherwise outside of to spark business investment or development within the Village of Maywood, or even for infrastructure. Okay. And as you see also lastly here, curb appeal pilot program, $100,000. Okay. Any questions? I'm sorry, go ahead, trustee.
Yeah, and I can most certainly speak to the curb appeal pilot program again. We got this idea at the National League of Cities conference, and it was basically to address like vacant lots like within our major corridors, and specifically as it relates to this program, we would what came to mind is 17th in Madison Street, which is in the Madison Street TIF, as well as vacant lots along the Fifth Avenue corridor to spruce those lots up to make them more attractive for developers or those who are looking to you know, purchase a home within the village, just to make our community more attractive. And through the conference, you know, they just gave us some creative ways how we can do creative things with some of the vacant lots we had, you know, just throughout the town. And so this is one of the programs that I you know, advocate for every year, and actually got it to be in the budget, as well as the business improvement program, which we expanded actually under when Perkins was the mayor, actually to include additional items. You know, so this program is what was once known as the facade program, but now it helps the business owners improve like the electrical as well as plumbing, or like if they're having issues with roofing as well, just identifying the conditions or looking at the conditions of some of the businesses that were in the Madison Street TIF, because we only have two TIF districts now, and that is the Roosevelt Road and the Madison Street TIF. Wanted to provide some additional support as people were looking to purchase properties within, you know, the Madison and the Roosevelt TIF district, to give them some additional resources to get their businesses off the ground. And then as it related to the property acquisition, for those who know about the Maywood Housing Authority building, the village is set to purchase that building at $300 and I want to say $50,000, and then the building that's adjacent to it as well, which is the Brown Paint Company property as well, which is both in the Madison Street TIF district.
Right. We have a question in the chat. Mr. Rails asked, how much will be spent to clean the green alleys, and should that money be used to complete the alleys?
And I believe the green alleys. So I believe that I don't think we have any more alleys within the Madison Street TIF or the Roosevelt Road TIF that need to be like properly paved. Where those alleys are at that need to be paved are more so in like the residential areas that need to be paved. And so that's, you know, somebody mentioned it earlier, that's where the concept came from as it relates to trying to TIF the whole entire village to be able to address some of those concerns, which I don't think is the right steps to take to address those type of concerns. But that was where the concept came from, to be able to address like alleys that are outside of, for example, the Madison and Roosevelt Road TIF, because there are a lot of alleys that are outside of those areas that need to be, fully paid.
What happened to the St. Charles TIF?
It expired. The St. Charles and Lake Street TIF both expired.
Well, Trustee, if I can add some insight to that St. Charles TIF, part of the new train station development, the St. Charles TIF was actually drained in order to provide matching funds for that RTA development of the train station, metro train station. And I think $323,000 also was taken from or withdrawn from the general fund in the Village of Maywood
Right.
to complete that project. So
Right.
yes, the St. Charles TIF is no longer in existence. As you all know, CFA has been providing town halls concerning the TIFs, and we will do others in the near future to inform and educate the citizens. And we certainly would love for Trustee Brandon, Trustee Jones, and others to come back and share their insights on the new proposed TIF districts in the Village of Maywood that will cover the entire village. Okay. So speaking
property, can I just go back one time? Can I ask a question about that acquisition of the property? What do the board, what are they going to do with that property when they buy it on Fifth Avenue? Those two buildings.
Okay, Trustee Jones.
Are we just buying them?
He's in the chat and he's going to speak up on that. Trustee Jones.
Yeah, so I don't know if the exact plan is clear. This idea of purchasing that building has been around since the Maywood Housing Authority, that entity dissolved. At the time, the Joliet Housing Authority had absorbed that building, so that property is owned by, owned by the federal government. It's a federal agency, although we had our individual entities. So there has been ideas thrown, around as potentially utilizing it for village administration or some sort of village hall. There's been ideas to that space, and behind it is actually there's an alley, and then it's zoned actually for residential. I think a multi-use residential. I have to look at the zoning, but essentially, I think the idea was potentially leveraging that space for a village hall, but then again, or some other use. But again, I think that's where we have to be very clear about what our plans are, because that same idea was coupled in that municipal campus idea that also introduced this concept of building the village hall adjacent to the library, building some sort of sports complex. I guess where the baseball field or area would be, and then building redeveloping the pool. So that's my understanding. Of course, ask more questions, but that's what my latest understanding is.
Okay. And one of the things that I will share with the citizens, if you'd like, please let us know if you don't have an opportunity to look at the information regarding the newly proposed TIFs on the Village of Maywood website. We'd be more than happy to share our fact-finding document with you that shares the information, as well as some of the recent activities of local businesses and new businesses that have come to Maywood that are receiving money from the TIF districts. Okay. And as you see out of the Roosevelt TIF, some of the activities that they hope to participate in as far as contractual and professional services, when you take a look at the actually TIF reports, and again, I know I sound like a broken record, but there has not been a TIF report from the Village of Maywood since 2023. And the 2022 TIF report was just done January of this year. It will show you more in detail a breakdown of the allowable activities and expenditures out of those TIFs. So it'll show you how much the attorneys are being paid out of those TIFs, how much the engineers and contractors or businesses that are being paid out of those TIFs. So we look forward to that. And also, Trustee Brandon, you did mention that with that business improvement plan, the allowable amount that residents or businesses will receive, you advocated an increase for that. Trustee Brandon, you still with us? I know everyone has to take a nice.
Again, I'm sorry.
No, I was saying you did mention that you advocated for an increase for that home improvement program and the business improvement program for the allowable amount that the businesses can receive.
Yeah, absolutely. And we I did that when Trustee Jones was the chair for the finance committee, and did it for both the Roosevelt Road TIF district area as well as the Madison TIF district area as well.
Okay, well, thank you, sir. Thank you both for your service. And of course, state grants, the Strong Community Program grant, Rebuild Main Street grant, Black Caucus grant, $2.5 million. What Black Caucus? Is this federal or is this local, state?
I'm pretty sure that's the state Black Caucus, if I'm not mistaken. But that is, just so you know, that is the money that has been referred to essentially do the scope of work and the preliminary plans for this municipal campus that I've wanted to draw attention to, because I'm not sure if the community is quite following, but we received these resources from, I believe it's Illinois Black Caucus, and with the idea that we were going to present, we're going to use these resources to present a proposal of how we would, essentially redevelop Fifth Avenue in the area where our current police department library is. And so a part of that, what we have to prove out is how we would finance this campus essentially. And so those resources are supposed to be used to create architectural drawings, and soil samples, and come up with drawings, and et cetera. That costs a lot of money, as you can see. So if that takes about $2.5 million just to kind of get to that part, then you can only imagine what the actual project would be. Which I've told the community that my concern is, and I'm almost positive that the significant recommendation would be able to do a bond issuance to fulfill that. So just so you all know what that's for, it's not for any development, but it's actually funding to prepare a scope of work for a larger development.
We don't have that grant yet, right?
We do have that grant. My understanding in terms of cash on hand, don't quote me. I believe we received some of it, but I believe you have to there's phases, right? You have to prove out certain things. So I think that's where when I brought it up at the board meeting, there's kind of this discussion of, oh, well, we haven't gotten there yet, kind of dismissing it. But the point is that once we are updated on our audits, and in particular our audits with Baker Tilly for our general funds and our other funds, then we'll be eligible to figure out our updated bond rating, based on our financials and what we will be eligible for. And I'm positive that's going to be where we're going to show some sort of bond issuance company our ability to finance that, because as you can see from our general fund, we don't have $100 million or whatever the project be laying around. So they're going to look for what credit card or what line of credit are you going to use, and typically for that type of project at the municipal level, that's where you have to leverage bond resources or TIF resources.
Well, Trustee Jones, with no disrespect, that's what your finance committee is supposed to stay on top of when this money comes in, where it's going and how it's being used and how much you have left. And is the rebuild Main Street part of Fifth Avenue too?
Yeah, that's part of Fifth Avenue.
Okay, so we're talking about almost $5 million just within part of Fifth Avenue with the Black Caucus grant and the Rebuild Main Street grant.
Now one of them is, like Trustee Jones' point, is just for like a study.
Yeah.
It's not going to do anything as far as like no foundation or no construction that's happening with that. With the other one, it's just for like benches and to enhance the aesthetics of like Fifth Avenue or part of Fifth Avenue.
Got you. Okay, I just have one more quick question to Trustee Jones. What's our village's bond rating right now?
If I'm not mistaken, I believe it's like B+ or B-. I have to get back on you to you on that.
Yeah, we haven't went out for a bond, so we haven't went out for a bond, and I mean since before our time actually.
Yeah, I mean,
so we don't even know what the current bond rating is.
I mean, it's
credit rating.
It's essentially what would be the last time you ran, which is a long time ago. And I guess to the point of what the role of the finance committee is, or just any committee, it is supposed to kind of talk about these things, et cetera. But we have to have visibility into these things, and you got to have transparency, and it helps for people who are working with you. Because really, we shouldn't have to solicit these things. These things should be transparent, and we should be able to view these things on the website and to follow it. So the fact that it takes this type of organization to understand how we're using funding for it just means that we need to lean in on transparency. But the point of me bringing that up is just so the community understands what those resources are for and then which direction we're going. So it's really now the onus is going to be on the residents to now, since we hopefully get the framework to understand where we're going. Now it's about you kind of getting ahead of it and kind of saying, okay, here's where I need you all to pause, and so we can have a discussion about how we're moving forward. Versus what has been the culture is that the board, the majority of the board rather, will essentially kind of just advise the community on what we're doing, which is a different conversation than kind of say, hey, here's some ideas and what's your feedback. It's really about, hey, here's what we're doing and it's last minute, so let's vote on it and go from there. That's been the culture.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for giving us at least a glimpse into that, the generalized, tag, as far as that $2.5 million and the purpose of what it's slated to be allocated for. And Ms. Olivier has an excellent question. Has the community weighed in on creating this civic center complex versus, repairing our streets and sidewalks and adding sidewalks to the north end? I guess this goes back to, again, prioritizing and possibly soliciting the community for prioritizing some of those initiatives.
And to answer that, Johnny, not even the board has been brought in. So the board or the community has been brought on. We haven't given any direction to staff or anyone else that this is the collective direction we want to move into as a board. And so that's what we have to get to. That's step one. What is the board's collective ideas or direction as it relates to building a village hall, building the sports complex, and all of these are major ticket items. We have not even had one conversation on it from the board level as it relates to which direction we want to go. Some may think it's a better idea instead of building over by purchasing the land over there by adjacent to the library to utilize the land that we already own. Whether it's the Maywood Market location, whether it's where the police department stands at right now. So none of those conversations have happened for us to be able to flesh out any of these ideas.
Mm-hmm. And even Trustee Jones also brings up in the chat that, speaking of a sports center or civic center complex, and he just adds that, one of the other pride jewels that shares a zip code with the Village of Eternal Light is Loyola Health Center, and it has a beautiful facility, a health facility there. And again, as you know, Loyola has been a pride community partner with the Village of Maywood for decades. And so again, if it just is a matter of sharing that type of information and welcoming citizens to their facilities and vice versa. I know Ms. Brown has been working with the staff and various departments at Loyola, and Loyola is very instrumental in being a part of the Village of Maywood Chamber of Commerce. I wonder if, or has the Chamber of Commerce reached out to the Village of Maywood concerning some of the ARPA initiatives or some of the grant collaborative aspects as far as home ownership or business development, just to, again, provide that type of transparency. I can only say, and I hope that CFA will continue to do these type of town halls and talkbacks to share insight and more information with residents. But also, I would encourage the trustees. We'd love to see some of your articles and information, in the village newsletter, okay, or the emails that go out, or even op-eds or editorials in the Village Free Press. Because I think for me, I can say I've learned more in this evening regarding the village budget and what's going on and why it's going on and how it either initiated or came about than I've seen in watching the village board meetings for the past couple of years. So I can't speak for everyone, but I know, again, the community stakeholders that we have, on the phone with us, and entrepreneurs that have had, from my knowledge, wonderful opportunities to bring programs and projects to the Village of Maywood. And unfortunately, some of them have not been materialized. I'm still optimistic. So with that in mind, we only have a couple of more slides, and I'll just kind of zoom back through these, because as we see, funding will be impacted federally as well as locally, and even regionally within the county, considering the state of the world that we're in now. So at this point, we'll open it up for any generalized questions that anyone may have.
So this is Sandra Gibson.
Ms. Gibson.
Hi, and I wanted to say, the overall budget, when I took a look at it on yesterday, increased from the 37 million to, let me look at this, the corporate fund, specifically from 37.4 million to about 39 million. And I was looking for where that money would come from. And I looked and looked, and it's coming from the property tax police pension and the property tax fire pension. And the red flag went off that maybe that's our tax dollars, is what that sounds like. And the difference in the increase from year to year is about 1.6 million, from the 37,000 to the 39,000, which I think is about 1.6 million between those two pensions. So I guess I got my fingers crossed to see if property tax bill will go up based on that increase. And I would have liked the finance department to reduce some expenditure somewhere else and keep that corporate fund flat. And they could, try to look at the 450,000 overtime budget for the police police department. Is one place where there's a lot of overtime. So that's something that should be reviewed. It's the one thing that jumped out at me on that. So I think that'll kind of sum up my concerns and something that the board should look at.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Gibson, for that insight. Anyone else?
I had a general statement, not about any one specific thing. I like this organization's approach. Most of the information is information given. It's not personal. And it's about the individual positions and the individual projects and information about them, but it's not personalized. And so as I listen around the village, I would encourage citizens. We've talked a lot about how we need to get involved and how we need to make our voices heard, how we need to hold everybody accountable. I'm encouraging people, when you go to make your positions heard, when you hold people accountable, when you look at the budget and question individual line items or a position that's newly created or an increase in a line item or a position, that we don't make it personal about a specific individual. That when we do that, we're not holding all the trustees accountable when we talk about one person in particular. There are a whole bunch of trustees, even the trustees that vote with an individual person. We need to hold each of those people accountable as well. And we need to hold the village manager accountable. We need to go and protest and make sure that the village manager hears our concerns, and that everybody across the village in positions that we're concerned about hear our concerns, and not just make it personal for a particular individual or this particular group. We need to, make sure that we talk about an issue, not a particular, what I'm saying. Everybody understands where I'm going with that. When we do that, we turn off some of those people. There's a whole lot of people who voted for the people who are in, and they need to hold them accountable as well. And if we're personalizing and come negatively, we turn off all those people who need to step up and hold our elected officials and our government accountable. So I'm encouraging people to look at positions and not individuals in those positions, and to look at the board overall, all of them, each and every one, and not just one individual or two individuals. So that's my spiel.
And certainly you have spilled very well. Thank you very much, Ms. Brown, as always. And as you know, CFA, again, we encourage people to share the information. We certainly want to invite any elected official from any of the municipal bodies to participate and share, because again, it's one collective village. This tonight, again, CFA found the urgency and the need. I'm only a quote unquote facilitator, so to speak, but CFA saw the need after waiting for information concerning the upcoming budget, waiting for information to be publicized, and waiting to see if this information was going to garner more community, dialogue. So I again appreciate everyone being on the line for so long and to go over this information. And we will publish this information later tomorrow and share it with the community. The board meeting is on Wednesday, and we encourage citizens to go out. If you are not able to be there and present and have a question, please submit it, to the clerk's office for public comment, which will be read. We will also have the link to the agenda if you're unable to see it on the quote unquote Village of Maywood website. So we are only being able to share this information. We started in February, basically, as a grassroots entity of like-minded individuals who care deeply about, the Village of Maywood. And as you say, not just circular around one individual, but again, it's about transparency and accountability with CFA. So again, you participated in many of our town hall meetings, and you've given us this type of feedback in your charge, and we can only hold ourselves up to that standard also, Ms. Brown. So again, we encourage everyone to call us, email us, send us a message. Not as it was stated, not everyone is on Facebook. We only use that platform, loosely, but most of our podcasts and information in these town halls will be on YouTube, so that it will be more accessible to other individuals. So I can only say those that have reached out directly to me or anybody else in CFA, I certainly appreciate it. Specifically Ms. Kelly, Ms. Rails, and others. We're glad to see you here. Ms. Alonzo, Ms. Henderson, Ms. Olivier, again, Ms. Gibson, thank you for always providing that type of direct accounting insight, as well as Ms. Nelson. I think the list can go on, but those that are part of this process, and I do appreciate Trustee Jones and Trustee Brandon, as well as former trustees Alexander and Jay Cox, as well as Mrs. Larry and Ms. Barbara Bailey, who's been a star within the community for many decades, for still being here. And again, we have to reach out to all corners of the Village of Maywood. So we're doing the best we can, right now, but we, again, only wanted to share this information because, again, these are your tax dollars, and we felt that the community should be aware of what is proposed, what is projected, and how the next fiscal year will hopefully be, beneficial to all Maywood citizens. So again, we thank you. If there are any other questions or comments, feel free to jump right on in.
Johnny, can I say something or just make a few comments as we're wrapping up? I want to make sure I leave the residents with kind of a where do we go from here type of mindset, or just kind of type of approach. And so I'm going to throw a few things out there just to complement what some other folks were saying. I think Miss Loretta Brown was spot on about it's not about one person. It's really about understanding how the form of government works and how the board works. And educated citizenry is a powerful citizenry. There's two types of cultures going on in Maywood. There's one culture that wants to be involved, and then there's another culture that would rather defer their civic engagement just to see results done. So they have the attitude, well, hell, buy the mayor a truck, if he's going to see that things are going to get done, right? And so I think we have to understand that people want a responsive government. And so we have to prove out, here's what the board's challenge is we have to prove out that our council manager form of government is responsive. And I think it starts with putting a lot of pressure on, and particularly the new trustees that are coming in, about training them, the citizenry, training them on their expectation. Also taking the village manager role extremely serious. We have a lot of considerations, a lot of financing consideration, TIF districts, tax implications, audit, lawsuits, et cetera, where you need an expert in that role. And I don't want to understate how important that is. And I'll use an example of the school district. We don't elect our superintendents for a reason, because you really have to have a certain individual with a certain expertise to do that. And the village reinforced they want a council manager form of government. They want to hire a nonpartisan third-party professional to run our complex organization, because we have 30, 40, 50, $60 million a year riding on this, right? So this isn't like a game. And so we have to take that seriously and have to go in with the confidence of understanding what that is and really understanding the type of skill set we need from a village manager. And so in terms of where do we go from here? So I believe once we pass the budget, the main focus of the community needs to be the village manager. we need to review this village manager, and then at that point we need to assess whether or not Maywood has the best village manager we can afford, period. It needs to be that simple. If we do, then we roll with what we got. If we don't, we go out and we figure out who's going to lead our town. And so that needs to be championed through the citizens, through the trustees, because how the board works is before the vote even gets to the mayor, there's 6 votes that happen already. And so what that means is that it's called the Board of Trustees for a reason. That council votes on it, and then really the mayor at that point, their vote, and most of the time, if it's something that the board has a solid consensus on, the mayor's vote essentially, wouldn't sway it. And so we have a lot of 4-3 going on in this community, which that should also alert the town. Like, why is there so much 4-3 going on? Why are we not doing the due diligence necessary to get a consensus? And so that's something I wanted to throw out there, just in terms of how we can move forward. A couple other things I want to throw out there too was how we can improve our financial situation in the village. It's twofold. One, Maywood is one of the lowest in terms of collecting the invoices of the property tax bills that we send out. We're in the bottom 15 in terms of communities of collecting that. And so we leave $7 to $10 million a year on the table of not collecting that. Now, there's some nuance to that, but if we can improve that collection percentage by 10 or 15%, we're talking millions of dollars of revenue that we can be collecting. And that's a little bit more complicated than how I just phrased it, but there's a huge opportunity there. I want to make sure we don't lose focus on that. And then the last thing I want to say, I really want to say kudos to the CFA and the folks that were contributing to that. I believe you all were the muscle behind why our community was educated enough not to change our form of government. You all should feel very proud about that. And that's what the citizenry needed, was a response from the community. And I also want to encourage you all, and Mike Romaine didn't pay me to say this, we need to invest in the Village Free Press. Free press is how we cut through a lot of this noise, is by investing in folks that have the skill set to tell the story to the residents in a way that we can digest it. And so the Village Free Press, or whatever that mechanism is, we have to make sure that we're financing that, because that information is critical. Otherwise, we do get disengaged. Otherwise, we do become, just kind of not thinking anything matters or not even following. And so I would encourage folks to, figure out how we can, the community and the Proviso Township needs to be supporting that, because that anchors a lot of that information that we need, so it doesn't look biased. Because some people are going to, hear me talk and say, well, he's just saying that that's his opinion, or the mayor or Trustee Brandon. You need folks in here that have the skill set to be nonpartisan, have the trust of the community that can give that message. So I just wanted to throw that out there as a few ways as we're moving forward to kind of think about is enforcing our form of government, a heightened focus on our village manager and how we're going to move forward, because that's a big one. After that, of course, we need to kind of manage this conversation. I would also say with these trustees have the power to create advisory committees underneath the committees that they chair. They can absolutely create these advisory committees, and you could tell them there's certain topics that you want the community to advise on. Let's invest in these citizen-led committees so the citizens can advise the board in a formal way, where it's more difficult to not support without explaining why you're not supporting what the residents ultimately, suggested. Like, those mechanisms create safeguards where we don't where people are engaged. And I think we saw, as a result of this election, despite all the money that we're putting into community engagement, that did not translate into more participation. And so that's something that the whole board and community needs to look in and figure out what that is. So I just want to kind of share that as we wrap up.
Okay. Before we get to Ms. Cole, I just want to add a comment that came from Queen Teresa Kelly. That's my nickname for her. And she makes a great suggestion, sort of dovetailing into what Trustee Jones stated, in that she says that, maybe we can start a campaign to lower the taxes in the Village of Maywood, or find out ways that citizens can certainly find the value in voting. As we know that 17% of the registered voters in Maywood did come out and participate in the April 1st election. Queen Kelly, I want to thank you for that comment. And Ms. Cole?
Yeah, I just wanted to just kind of piggyback a little bit on what Trustee Gill said. And that concerns the village manager. It's just difficult for me to understand how he could have, and I don't want to personalize it, but it is what it is, could get a raise, a bonus rather, without having a performance review. So now I don't know, what can make that happen. Of course, the mayor should make that happen, and the trustees should be calling for that as well. So, and you mentioned the newspaper, so maybe we can write an editorial if nobody wants to push it, individually, in Michael's newspaper. And I think, that's probably a great way to do it. And I want to show speak to my disappointment too, that the newly elected trustees and officials are not on this town hall. I mean, what a perfect place for them to learn something about, and gain some insight into the job that they're getting ready to take hold of. And it just seems to me that, as far as I could see who was on here, not one of them is on here. Am I right about that? Not one newly elected trustee is on this Zoom? And that says something to me.
Well,
Johnny, we have one newly elected official.
Right.
Brianna Henderson is here.
Oh, that's right. Miss Henderson.
Right.
Yes.
Yes, I am here.
Congratulations.
All right, great. Congratulations.
Say hello, Miss Library Commissioner.
Yeah.
Hello. I've been on the call all evening.
All right. Welcome.
Listening and absorbing all this information.
Welcome.
And the library is very important, but I'm mainly focusing on the village, the total village. So, but
I got that, but I just wanted to let people know that I am here.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Welcome, Brianna.
Thank you.
And Trustee Brandon, any closing thoughts or words of?
Yes, I'm still here. Again, as Trustee Jones said, you know, the residents have the power. They just have to know and remember that. And we answer to you all. And so if you guys are not involved or, you know, disengaged, you know, you have instances where people are, you know, freestyling and doing their own thing, and it may not be in the best interest of, you know, the residents of the Village of Maywood. And I want to thank you all for, you know, continue to be involved and to continue to be engaged. And we do it at the end of the day because we love Maywood, and we have a heart for the community. You know, you know, it is my plan to continue to show up on the, you know, the residents' behalf and do what I feel, you know, is right, and to encourage my colleagues to do the same. And, you know, try to work with my board colleagues to, you know, make sure that we are all, you know, lifting up Maywood, because the village deserves it. And, you know, the community is not dark, gloomy, and dead. I always say that, you know, as elected officials, we are ambassadors for the community. And so, you know, our goal is to continue to talk about things that are positive, right? And things that are happening in the village. So there are some positive things happening in the village as well that we got to continue to highlight and speak up as well, so that we can continue to encourage more positive activities to happen in the village too. And it's going to take all of us, you know, just continue to show up and do what we can with, you know, what we have, and holding everybody accountable. And to, you know, the whole point of the village manager situation, you know, we got to hold him accountable, and making sure that, you know, he's doing his due diligence and doing, you know, right by the residents of the Village of Maywood, and not just coming and collecting the check and going home, but that he's really engaged with the community. And, you know, it's important for the community to know who he is as well, and not just, you know, be silenced or hiding behind any particular elected official. But, you know, the residents pay him a good penny, and so it's important to make sure that you are getting what you're paying for in that particular role as well.
Sure. Thank you again, and everyone. Please remember, you're welcome to join CFA. Send us an email or call and say, hey, you'd like to be a part of our group. Again, like I say, we're a nonpartisan, you know, community grassroots group. We're not a nonprofit. We're not a for-profit. We're just for Maywood. So if you'd like to get involved and help us, you know, hold our elected officials accountable throughout the community. I think we've even expanded, as you all have probably seen from some of our podcasts, to consider other communities, because people like what we're investigating or looking into, or even providing information to educate from a civic standpoint residents. So, you know, but again, we're human, and it takes an effort, and many hands make light work. So again, if you'd like to join CFA, let us know if you have time. We're a very democratic organization. And as Mrs. Brown has spilt the tea with us, saying that it's not about an individual, but about the collective. So we hope to continue that. So again, on your screen, you see that our April series so far is available for download. These are some of the podcasts that we have shared. We're going to have some updates of information and issues that are or is of concern of citizens. And that's how basically we work. You know, when an individual or organization ask us, hey, look into this issue, or help me understand how this works, or what's really going on, we bring it back to the CFA group, and we chat about it. And if it's unanimously voted to pursue it, we set up subcommittees, and that's how we investigate the information and share the information. So some people may not like what we publish, but it's always fact-based and informational and honest and truthful. So again, you all are welcome to participate and join us in our efforts. So
okay, Johnny, before you close off, Trustee Jones did give his village cell phone number and his email address in case people want to reach him. Everybody's not looking at chat, so if you could just say what it is.
All right. Yes. Get your pens ready. I will, if you don't mind, Trustee Jones, share your information if you'd like to reach out to Trustee Jones via phone. The number to reach him is 708-288-8604. The number again is 708-288-8604. Or you can reach him at mjones, Jones, at maywood-il.gov. That's mjones at maywood-il.gov.
Can I say one last thing?
Yes.
Okay, this is Sandra. We did not see the budget to actual for 2025. If we can get that posted, that'd be great to see how the village actually spent the money. That'd be nice to put that out there, and we can review that.
And again, the reason I'd say this, and ladies and gentlemen, if you have not had an opportunity to meet Ms. Sandra Gibson, she is also a accounting CPA professional in our community. That is one of the things that we at CFA certainly have been doggedly watching. When will the quote unquote 2024 audit be available and published? It's paid for. They have paid the consulting contractor, Baker Tilly. It has not been published. So if we want to go back to 2023 and compare that with 2024, 2025, that would give us some idea. But moving forward, we have no idea. So,
but however, the actual is real time, and the finance director has that, so that's available. It's the actual. It's unaudited, and that's fine. But if we could just get the actual, that'd be great.
Yes, ma'am. Well, you have two trustees, and you know the FOIA process. If you can assist us in that, and we'd love to share that back out with the community. You know how the village is frugal and not wasteful with its resources and funds. I know former trustee Alexander has called it what again?
What?
Fraud, waste, and abuse.
And the last one is not to the benefit of the community.
Right.
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
In closing, for me, I would like to thank Brandon and Miguel for coming out, trustees. But what I would like to see is what's going to happen. We did this because we're going to have a budget meeting. I hope you take some of the comments that we have given you tonight and put those questions to the board and try to figure out some things. And I hope I see some of us at the board meeting or on whatever way you can see the board, but we need to be involved, pass the word out to everybody, because we need to take back our community. We almost got taken, you know, as that little girl did. We almost got taken because of, we don't want to, I love it when we say we're not being personal, but 4 and Go has been we've never seen the village in this shape. 4 votes, and I know I got it. And that's all this has been. I like the niceties, but we need to talk truth to power. And the trustees need to talk truth to power, and we need to talk truth to power. And holding back is not going to get us where we need to be. So please come to board meetings, come to board meetings, join us, give us ideas, and tell your people.
And if it's something you want to know, file your FOIA.
Oh boy.
Okay. And again, you know, it's suggested that again, that Ms. Gibson, you can certainly reach out to the village manager finance department, as you know, for the actual information. We'd be more than happy to work with you if we have the FOIA, if you don't, you know, have the time to do that. But we would need your certainly expertise in putting it all together. As well as it's suggested that, you know, the community should consider term limits, you know, for elected officials, you know.
I think the next thing we should, Johnny, could you put on your, however you do it, to sign up for the TIF, because we don't want Maywood to be totally TIF for 23 years. We're not going to be here 23 years in the future. Okay. And all we're doing is my babies, your grandbabies, everybody's babies is going to look at us and say, look what predicament they left us in. Right. 23 years with the school not having money. They tell half the truth. No, maybe we won't, but the library is going to have to raise their budget. The park district is going to have to raise their budget. Everybody around us is going to increase their budget, and it's going to affect our taxes.
Well, I just want to say one thing. Governor Pritzker was on today, and he was saying that people have got to come out and speak out in terms of what is happening with them and around them in their communities, in their towns, and in their states. And that's exactly what we're trying to do. And we got to encourage more people to come to the board meetings. I don't care if they don't say anything, sit in the seat and let them know that people are watching them.
Okay, I have placed in the chat the TIF registry information. If anybody would like access to the actual, it's a working document, but we have put together Maywood's new TIFs, new proposed TIFs, and it will probably give you the background information and what's coming up. Because as you know, if you've participated or watched the board meetings, it's always on the agenda, and there's never an update as far as when the meetings will be held. But I'm sure once the new board is sworn in, they will probably more than likely move fast on that. But what I'll do also, and I will put that link into the chat, so feel free to download or take a look at what we're starting to put information together, or watch the last town hall meeting with Miss Jackie Levy, who shared some invaluable information, and she, you know, had some serious questions, and we're going to invite her back to discuss, you know, some things that she was looking into on our behalf as far as the newly proposed TIFs, because again, when you go to the website, and some of the information in this document alludes to the website. So, you know, everything is hyperlinked. So if you want to look at the TIF map, if you want to look at the PowerPoint presentations that were presented, they're in a movie form. So you don't have to have Microsoft PowerPoint to watch it. You can just sit back and watch the presentations that were made throughout the community. But no one's really questioning how would this impact, you know, the village as a whole. So we wanted to share this information back out to the community and get individuals to sign up for the interested parties registry, because by law, those that are part of that registry will know firsthand what's happening, what's going on when there's any activities concerning the TIF. So again, everyone, if you still would like information concerning tonight's budget overview and the documentation or the PowerPoint presentation that that you saw with the information, we'd be more than happy to share that with you also. And give me a second and I'll put that link in the chat also. And everything again in this document is hyperlinked. I apologize, I just put the link in there without the description of what it is. But that link has the document, and what's contained in it is actually a description of tonight. It shows the link to the special board meeting agenda. It has the proposed budget. It also includes the PowerPoint presentation. It has the information on the village manager's page as far as contact information, as well as the finance director. If you have any direct questions, it basically gives the background information that we shared tonight, as well as some other highlighted details, that we spoke about. That again, that the 2024 audit is still delinquent. The additional information concerning the information that should have been updated as far as the past TIF reports, which certainly will affect the budget and other funds. That information, we have provided links to that information also. And even as it has been stated, we look at the budget process that's codified, and we're curious as to why that calendar benchmarks have not been met. So thank you again, everyone. Mr. Howlett, would you care to say hello and good evening to the group? He's one of our new.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy that I received the notice about this session, and this is the kind of thing that the kind of organization, kind of people that need to be doing what we're doing here this evening, and step up the pace as we move along. So yeah, I'm more than happy to be a part of this. Count me in, and let's go.
All right, thank you, sir. And Miss Barbara Bubbling Brown Sugar Bailey. Does she want to remain silent? Miss Olivier? I know she was at some place where she couldn't chat with us earlier. Miss Rel, thank you for everything that you do in our communities. And it goes without saying the tireless work and efforts of Ms. Cole when it comes to youth and reparations and everything else in between. Ms. Alonso?
Thank you, Johnny, for all that you do. This is great work that you have put together.
Well,
and giving us the tools to work with it.
I'm only doing this.
All you need to do now is find me a few more hours in the day.
Right.
I'm sure everybody feels that way.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Ms. Denver, thank you for joining us and being the chat moderator.
Good night.
Okay.
Good night, everyone.
All right. Good night, Ms. Ress.
All right. Good night.
Okay. Ms. Howard, thanks again for joining us. Okay. Mr. Jones, thank you. Trustee Brandon, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate the invite.
Ms. Nelson.
One lane in each direction from Abbey Drive to
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Johnny. Good to see you.
Good to see you. What did we get wrong?
Great information. I appreciate the background. Definitely need some respect of my time. 4.5 hours is a bit.
Yes.
Yeah,
In love.
Yes.
Hallelujah.
Thank you. Thank you.
But we're used to it.
Yes.
We want people to participate and continue to come. So
right.
I think we got to have some kind of balance.
All right. Yes. Well, thank you, everyone. At this time, we'll start the recording. And as you know, we're going to put this town hall, once it's edited down, make it available for the community. So we'll go ahead and cease the recording now. But thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Johnny.